The glass cage. The rain in Seattle does not wash things away. It presses them down. It is a heavy, relentless curtain of grey that descends upon the city, muting the sounds of life and amplifying the silence of secrets. It was 3:17 in the morning, the hour of the wolf, the time when the human body is at its weakest and the mind is most vulnerable to its own ghosts. Inside the sprawling, modernist house made of steel and floor-to-ceiling glass, the silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of water against the windows and the frantic staccato clicking of a keyboard. The house was a masterpiece of contemporary architecture, designed by Ethan Caldwell himself. It was sharp, angular, and breathtakingly cold. It sat perched on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Puget Sound, like a precarious thought waiting to fall. To the outside world, this house was a symbol of Ethan's resurrection, a testament to his genius returning from the ashes. To Sarah, it was a beautiful, transparent cage. Sarah sat at the long oak dining table, which was buried under layers of blueprints, architectural schematics, and empty coffee mugs. The only light came from the glow of her dual monitors and a single, dim desk lamp that cast long, distorted shadows across the room. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. At 34, Sarah should have been in the prime of her beauty. Instead, she was a portrait of fragility. Her skin was translucent, pale enough to show the roadmap of blue veins beneath her eyes. Her collarbones protruded sharply from the oversized cashmere sweater she wore, a sweater that used to fit her 3 years ago. She stopped typing. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. A wave of dizziness washed over her, tilting the room on its axis. She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. It felt as though gravity had suddenly doubled, pulling her marrow down toward the earth. "Focus," she whispered to herself. Her voice was a dry rasp, barely audible over the rain. Just 2 more structural load assessments, just 2 more. She opened her eyes and looked at the screen. The project was titled The Elysium Concert Hall. It was the bid of the decade. If Ethan won this, he would be back on the A-list. He would be the king of Seattle architecture again, not just the promising talent who had a tragic accident. But the calculations in Ethan's original draft were wrong. They were subtle errors, the kind caused by arrogance and a lack of attention to detail, but they were fatal. If built this way, the support beams in the West Wing would shear under the stress of a heavy snowstorm. Ethan didn't deal with the boring math anymore. He dealt with vision. He dealt with soul. It was Sarah who stayed up until dawn, fixing the math, rewriting the proposals, and polishing the pitch decks until they gleamed with perfection. She was the invisible mortar holding his brick castle together. A sudden tickle started in the back of her throat. It wasn't a normal cough. It was a deep, wet rattle that came from the bottom of her chest. Sarah clamped her hand over her mouth, trying to stifle the sound. She didn't want to wake him. Ethan needed his sleep. He had the big presentation with the board of directors tomorrow. He needed to be fresh, charming, and magnetic. The cough forced its way out, a violent spasm that shook her entire frail frame. She grabbed a tissue from the box next to the laptop and pressed it to her lips, hunching over as her body convulsed. It felt like someone was dragging a serrated knife through her lungs. The spasm lasted for a full minute, leaving her gasping for air, tears streaming from her eyes. When the fit finally subsided, She pulled the tissue away. It was heavy. In the dim light of the monitor, the stain blossomed dark and ominous. Crimson. Fresh, bright red blood. It wasn't just a speck this time. It was a clot. Sarah stared at it, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at the red flower blooming on the white paper, feeling a strange, detached sense of resignation. She crumpled the tissue into a tight ball and shoved it deep into the trash can beneath the table, burying it under a pile of rejected draft papers. "Not now," she murmured, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She checked for stains on her sweater. Clean. Good. "I don't have time for this right now." She reached for the bottle of water on the table, her hand shaking so badly that the water sloshed over the rim. She took a sip, trying to wash away the metallic taste of iron that coated her tongue. It tasted like rusting pennies. She looked toward the master bedroom door. It was closed. Behind that door, Ethan was sleeping soundly, and she imagined him sprawled on the king-sized bed, his breathing deep and even, his body strong and healthy. He was a miracle of modern medicine. 5 years ago, after the car crash that nearly killed him, doctors said he might never walk again, might never work again. But he had bounced back with a vitality that bordered on supernatural. He was glowing with life, while she was slowly fading into the background, like a watercolour painting left out in the rain. Sarah forced herself back to the screen. The Elysium Project. She had to finish the lighting specifications for the main atrium. Ethan wanted it to look like divine intervention, shafts of light piercing through the darkness. It was ironic. He wanted to design a building that celebrated light, while his wife sat in the dark, coughing up her life force to make it happen. She worked for another 3 hours. The rain never stopped. It only changed tempo, from a soft patter to a hard, driving rhythm, then back again. By 6 in the morning, the sky outside began to shift from black to a bruised purple. The city of Seattle was waking up. The lights on the Space Needle faded into the morning mist. Sarah saved the final file, Elysium Final Submission V12 PDF. She emailed it to Ethan's private account, then deleted the sent receipt from her outbox. He didn't like to be reminded that she did the heavy lifting. He preferred the narrative, where he was the genius who pulled an all-nighter, fueled by inspiration. She let him have that narrative. It was the only gift she had left to give. She stood up, and her knees buckled. A sharp, piercing pain shot through her lower back and hips. It felt like her bones were made of glass and were slowly cracking under the weight of her own skin. This was the bone marrow failure. Her body had stopped producing enough blood cells. She was running on empty, an engine seizing up. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself, breathing through the pain. Inhale. Exhale. Mask it. She walked slowly to the kitchen, her feet dragging on the polished concrete floor. She needed to start the coffee. Ethan liked the Colombian roast, ground fresh, brewed at exactly 200 degrees. As the coffee grinder whirred to life, shattering the morning silence, the bedroom door opened. Ethan emerged. He looked like he had stepped out of a magazine advertisement for luxury watches. He was wearing silk pyjama bottoms and a tight white t-shirt that accentuated his broad shoulders and flat stomach. His hair, dark and thick, was tousled in that perfect, effortless way. He stretched, his joints popping, radiating energy and heat. "Morning," he said, his voice thick with sleep, but strong. He walked past Sarah without looking at her, heading straight for the coffee machine. He patted her shoulder absently as he passed, a gesture one might give to a piece of furniture that was in its correct place. "Did you hear the rain last night? It was insane. I slept like a baby, though." Sarah forced a smile. It felt tight on her face. "I heard it. It was intense." "Is the coffee ready?" Ethan asked, peering into the carafe. "Almost. Just a few seconds." Ethan leaned against the marble island, drumming his fingers on the countertop. He looked at the dining table, still covered in papers. He frowned slightly. "Did you tidy up the presentation?" he asked, his tone casual, but Sarah knew the anxiety beneath it. "Yes," Sarah said, turning to the stove to start eggs. "I checked the structural loads again. The West Wing calculations were off by a factor of 0.5. I fixed it. And I rewrote the introduction to the lighting concept. It flows better now." Ethan let out a sigh of relief. "Great. I knew that West Wing felt wrong. I was going to check it this morning, but I was just so wiped out yesterday. My brain was fried." He didn't thank her. He never thanked her anymore. It was expected. It was her duty. She was the wife. She was the support system. "You look tired," Ethan said, finally looking at her. But he wasn't really seeing her. He was looking at the dark circles under her eyes with a hint of annoyance, as if her fatigue was a stain on his perfect morning. "You should get out more, Sarah. You're always in this house. It's making you pale. You look like a vampire." Sarah cracked an egg into the pan. The sizzle was loud. "I've just been busy, Ethan. The project is my job," he cut in, pouring himself a mug of coffee. "You help out, sure, and I appreciate it. But you don't need to martyr yourself over it. I have a team at the office." Sarah didn't answer. His team at the office consisted of 2 interns and a junior architect who couldn't calculate the slope of a roof if his life depended on it. If Sarah didn't martyr herself, Ethan would be bankrupt within a month. But she couldn't say that, and the ego of a man like Ethan was as fragile as the glass walls surrounding them. If she cracked it, the whole house would come down. "So," Ethan said, taking a long sip of coffee and leaning back, a dreamy look entering his eyes. "Maya is coming to the site visit today." The name landed in the room like a stone dropped in a pond. Maya. Sarah's hand slipped, and the spatula clattered against the pan. She quickly recovered, gripping the handle tight. "Maya? The violinist?" "Yes," Ethan said, his voice softening, taking on a tone of reverence that he never used with Sarah anymore. "She's interested in the acoustics of the hall. I told her I'd walk her through the blueprints. She has this incredible intuition about space and sound. She said something yesterday that completely changed how I thought about the ceiling curvature." "She's a musician, Ethan, not an architect," Sarah said quietly, focusing on the eggs. Ethan scoffed. "That's exactly the point, Sarah. You're too technical. You look at the numbers. Maya looks at the feeling. She brings the soul. She's my muse for this project. Without her inspiration, Elysium would just be a box. With her, it's art." The word stung. Too technical. Sarah was the one who made sure his art didn't collapse and kill people. But in his eyes, she was the mechanic, and Maya was the poetry. Is she coming here? Sarah asked. No, we're meeting at the firm. Then lunch. Maybe dinner if the meeting runs late. Don't wait up for me. Ethan set his mug down and walked over to the dining table. He picked up a stack of blueprints she had spent 4 hours correcting. He glanced at them, nodded with satisfaction, taking credit for the lines she had drawn, and rolled them up. By the way, he said, turning back to her, I noticed the credit card bill. $500 at a pharmacy. What are you buying, Sarah? That's insane. Sarah froze. The medication. The experimental blood boosters that insurance wouldn't cover because they deemed her condition pre-existing and palliative. She had been buying them out of pocket to keep herself standing, to keep working for him. It's vitamins, Sarah lied, her voice hollow. And some skincare. High-end stuff. I'm trying to fix the paleness, like you said. Ethan rolled his eyes, a gesture of indulgent exasperation. Just be careful, okay? We're tight until the Elysium advance comes in. I need every cent available for the marketing push. I want to buy a full-page ad in Architectural Digest next month. I know, Sarah whispered. I'll be careful. Ethan checked his reflection in the glass window, adjusted his hair, and grabbed his leather portfolio. He looked like $1 million. He looked like a man who owned the world. Wish me luck, he said, flashing a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes when he looked at her. Good luck, Sarah said. He walked out the door. The heavy front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the empty house. The engine of his Porsche roared to life in the driveway, a guttural, aggressive sound, and then faded as he sped away down the winding, wet road. Sarah was alone again. She turned off the stove. She looked at the eggs in the pan. She wasn't hungry. The thought of food made her stomach turn. She scraped the breakfast into the trash, right on top of the bloody tissue. She walked to the bathroom, her sanctuary. It was a pristine space of white marble and chrome. She opened the medicine cabinet. It was packed with orange bottles, cyclosporin, prednisone, anti-nausea, painkillers, a chemical cocktail to keep a dying body moving. She took 2 large white pills and swallowed them without water. They scraped down her dry throat. She looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were dull, the spark long gone. She pulled down the collar of her sweater. Her chest was a map of bruises, yellow, purple, green. The slightest bump caused a hematoma now. Her platelets were critically low. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. The screen flashed. Dr. Evans, Hematology, Seattle Grace. Sarah hesitated. She knew what this call was. She had been dodging it for 3 days. She pressed answer and put the phone to her ear. Hello? Mrs. Caldwell. Dr. Evans's voice was grave, professional, and devoid of the usual pleasantries. We got your latest blood panel back from the lab yesterday. I tried calling you last night. I was working, Sarah said softly. Sarah, listen to me, the doctor said, his tone urgent. You cannot be working. You shouldn't even be standing up. Your hemoglobin is at 5.2. Normal is 12. You're critically anemic. And your white blood cell count, it's collapsed. I feel okay, Sarah lied. She leaned against the sink to stop her legs from trembling. You are not okay, Dr. Evans snapped. You are a ticking time bomb, and you are at high risk for a cerebral hemorrhage or massive infection. You need a transfusion immediately. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. I can't today, Sarah said, closing her eyes. Ethan has the presentation. If I go to the hospital, he'll find out. He'll worry. It will distract him. He should worry. Dr. Evans raised his voice. He is your husband. Does he even know that you've stopped responding to the standard treatment? Does he know we are looking at bone marrow failure? No, Sarah whispered. He doesn't know. Why? Because. Sarah looked around the beautiful cold bathroom. Because he finally got his life back. He was broken for so long, Doctor. He was in a dark place for years after the accident. He's finally happy. He's shining again. If I tell him I'm dying, it will destroy him. He's not strong enough to handle it. Sarah, you are killing yourself to protect his mood, Dr. Evans said, his voice softening into pity. You need a bone marrow transplant. That is the only cure left. We need to start the search for a donor. And that costs money. It costs time. You need to be in the hospital. I have money saved, Sarah said quickly. I have an emergency fund. I've been saving for 5 years. I have enough for the initial procedure. Then come in. Bring the money. Check yourself in. I will, Sarah promised. Tomorrow. After the presentation. Once he wins the bid, he'll be secure. Then I can take a break. Sarah. Tomorrow, Dr. Evans. I promise. She hung up before he could argue further. She gripped the edge of the sink, staring at her reflection. Tomorrow. She just had to survive one more day. One more day of hiding the bruises. One more day of swallowing the blood. One more day of being the invisible shadow behind the great Ethan Caldwell. She went back out to the living room. The rain had intensified. It was hammering against the glass walls, demanding to be let in. Sarah sat down at her computer. She wasn't done. Ethan had forgotten the landscaping budget files on the server. She needed to organise them and send them to his tablet before he reached the office. She began to type again. Click, click, click. The sound was lonely. It was the sound of a life being spent, keystroke by keystroke, for someone else's dream. The city of emeralds and lies. Downtown Seattle was a different world. While the house on the cliff was silent and grey, the city was alive with the noise of commerce and ambition. Ethan's office was located in a refurbished industrial loft in Pioneer Square. Exposed brick, high beams, expensive espresso machines. It smelled of roasted coffee and cedar. Ethan walked in like a conquering hero. The 2 interns, eager and underpaid, looked up with admiration. "Morning, boss," one of them chirped. "Morning, guys," Ethan said, tossing his wet coat onto a rack with a practised flair. "Is the conference room prepped?" "Yes, sir. The model is set up. The lighting is adjusted." Good. Ethan strode into his private office, a glass-walled enclosure that offered no privacy but signalled importance. He opened his laptop. The file from Sarah was there. Elysium, Final, Submission, V12, PDF. He opened it. He scrolled through the pages. It was perfect. The math was tight. The prose was elegant. The logic was unassailable. He felt a surge of pride. I did this, he thought. I created this. It was easy to forget the night Sarah spent hunched over the keyboard. In his mind, those were just details. The vision was his. The spark was his. Sarah was just the tool he used to get it out of his head. He checked his watch. 10 o'clock. Maya was coming at 11. He felt a flutter in his chest. It wasn't the irregular heartbeat of a sick man. It was the adrenaline of infatuation. Maya was 26. She was vibrant. She played the violin with a passion that made Ethan weep. She was everything Sarah was not. Sarah was sickness, hospitals, bills, and the heavy, suffocating past. Maya was the future. Maya was Elysium. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet. It wasn't an engagement ring. He wasn't that reckless. But it was a statement. It cost $6,000. He had put it on the company credit card, categorizing it under client relations/gifts. He justified it easily. Maya was a consultant. She inspired the design. She deserved a bonus. He didn't think about the fact that Sarah was wearing a coat from Goodwill because she wanted to save money for the household. He didn't think about the fact that he had scolded Sarah for spending $500 on medicine. The human mind is excellent at compartmentalization, and Ethan was a master architect of his own reality. At 11 sharp, the glass doors opened. Maya walked in. The room seemed to brighten instantly. She was wearing a red trench coat that cut through the grey Seattle morning like a blade. Her hair was wet with rain, curling wildly around a face that was flushed with health and energy. She carried her violin case slung over her shoulder. "Ethan!" she called out, her voice musical and loud. Ethan stood up, smoothing his jacket. "Maya, you're right on time." She walked into his office, bringing with her the scent of rain and expensive perfume, floral, sweet, intoxicating. She didn't shake his hand. She kissed him on the cheek, lingering just a second too long. "I couldn't sleep," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I was thinking about what you said about the acoustic shell, the idea of the wood curving like a rib cage. It's genius." "It was your idea," Ethan said, modesty feigned. "You talked about the resonance of the body. I just translated it." "We make a good team," Maya said, leaning against his desk. She picked up a pencil and twirled it. "So, are you ready for the big pitch?" "Born ready," Ethan said. "But first, I wanted to show you the 3D render. I added the changes." He motioned for her to come around the desk. She stood next to him, her arm brushing against his. The heat coming off her was palpable. Ethan felt drunk on it. This was life. This was what he deserved after the accident. He had suffered enough. He deserved this brightness. They spent an hour going over the plans. Maya laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm when she got excited. She looked at him with wide, admiring eyes. "You're amazing, Ethan," she whispered, as they looked at the final render of the concert hall glowing in the virtual sunset. "You're going to change this city." "We are," Ethan corrected. Suddenly, Maya's face went pale. The change was instant. One moment she was laughing, the next her hand flew to her chest. She gasped, a sharp intake of air. "Maya?" Ethan asked, his smile freezing. She stumbled back, dropping the pencil. I can't." Her knees gave way. "Maya!" Ethan lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the floor. She was light, but she was dead weight in his arms. "Call 911!" Ethan screamed at the interns outside the glass walls. "Call an ambulance! Now!" He laid her down on the expensive Persian rug. Her face was turning a terrifying shade of grey. Her lips were blue. She was clutching her chest, her eyes wide with panic. "It hurts," she gasped. "My heart, it's stopping." "Stay with me," Ethan pleaded, his voice cracking. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his bubble of invincibility. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." He held her hand, rubbing it frantically. He felt a terror he hadn't felt since the night of his accident 5 years ago. The fear of loss, the fear of the dark. "Please," he whispered, tears pricking his eyes. "Don't do this. Not now." The sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Ethan didn't notice that his phone was buzzing in his pocket. It was Sarah. She was calling to tell him she had found a mistake in the budget file, a mistake that could cost him the bid. She was calling to save him, again. But Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy holding the hand of another woman, praying to a God he rarely believed in to save the love of his life. The phone rang and rang, vibrating against his leg, ignored, until it went to voicemail. The silence of the lamb. Back at the glass house, Sarah lowered the phone. She looked at the screen. Call forwarded. She sighed. A deep, rattling sigh. She sat back in her chair. The pain in her bones was becoming a constant, thrumming roar. She reached for the bottle of painkillers again. She opened the budget file on her screen. The error was in row 45, a misplaced decimal point in the steel fabrication costs. It made the project look $2 million cheaper than it actually was. If the client found out later, they would sue for fraud. If they found out now, they would laugh Ethan out of the room. She had to fix it. She couldn't just tell him. He wasn't answering. She had to log into the server remotely, hack into his presentation file while it was likely open on his computer, and change it live. It was risky. If he saw the numbers change while he was looking at them, he'd be confused. But she had no choice. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She bypassed the security protocols she had set up for him. She accessed the mainframe. She found the file. She made the change. Delete. Insert. Save. Done. She slumped forward, resting her forehead on the cool wood of the desk. "You're welcome, Ethan," she whispered to the empty room. She felt a trickle of warmth on her upper lip. Another nosebleed. She grabbed a tissue, tilting her head back. She looked at the ceiling. The rain was still falling. It felt like the sky was weeping for her because she had no tears left to shed for herself. She wondered what Ethan was doing right now. Was he laughing? Was he drinking champagne? Was he with her? She didn't know about Maya's collapse yet. She didn't know that fate was about to shuffle the deck in the most cruel way possible. She only knew that she was tired. So incredibly tired. She closed her eyes, just for a moment. "I'll go to the hospital tomorrow," she told herself again. "Tomorrow, everything will change." But in the world of high-stakes tragedy, tomorrow is a luxury that few can afford. And for Sarah, the clock was ticking much faster than she realised. The White Room. The emergency room at Seattle Grace Hospital was a cacophony of suffering, a stark contrast to the quiet, controlled elegance of Ethan's architectural world. Here, structure meant nothing. Chaos was the only design. Ethan paced the length of the waiting area corridor, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking sharply against the linoleum floor. The sound was irritable, fast, out of sync with the slow, rhythmic beeping of the monitors drifting from the open bays. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the perfect styling he had cultivated that morning. His jacket was thrown over a plastic chair, his tie loosened. He looked like a man unravelling. He wasn't thinking about the pitch meeting. He wasn't thinking about the millions of dollars on the line with the Elysium project. He wasn't even thinking about Sarah, his wife, who was currently at home ensuring that the very project he was neglecting didn't implode. All he could see was Maya's face, that terrifying shade of ash grey as she crumpled to the floor of his office. A doctor in blue scrubs emerged from behind a curtained partition. Dr. Harrison. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes from telling people bad news all day. Mr. Caldwell? Ethan stopped pacing instantly. He lunged forward, invading the doctor's personal space. How is she? Is she awake? What happened? Dr. Harrison took a step back, adjusting his glasses. She is stable for now. We've administered medication to regulate her heart rhythm, but she is very lucky she was with someone when it happened. If she had been alone... He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. What is it? Ethan demanded. She said her heart was stopping. It's hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the doctor explained, his voice clinical and detached. It's a genetic condition. The heart muscle becomes abnormally thick, making it harder for the heart to pump blood. In Maya's case, the obstruction is severe. She's been living on borrowed time. Ethan felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Borrowed time. It sounded poetic, tragic, exactly the kind of narrative that hooked into his saviour complex. Maya wasn't just a violinist. She was a fragile bird with a broken wing. Can you fix it? Ethan asked. We can manage the symptoms with beta blockers for a while, Dr. Harrison said, looking at his clipboard. But given the severity of today's episode, she needs a myectomy. It's a specialised open-heart surgery to remove part of the thickened muscle, and frankly, her anatomy is complex. There are only a few specialists I would trust with this case. The best one is in Zurich. Zurich, Ethan repeated. Switzerland. Yes, it's expensive, and it's urgent. Without it, the risk of sudden cardiac arrest is extremely high. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen in a month. But it will happen. Ethan looked through the gap in the curtains. He saw Maya lying on the gurney. She looked tiny, hooked up to IV lines and monitors. Her skin was pale, emphasising the darkness of her lashes. She looked like a sleeping angel. She doesn't have insurance, Ethan murmured, more to himself than the doctor. She's an artist. She lives gig to gig. Then she needs a benefactor, Dr. Harrison said bluntly. Or a miracle. For now, we can discharge her once her rhythm stabilises, but she cannot be alone. She needs constant monitoring. Stress is her enemy. She needs a calm, controlled environment. Ethan nodded slowly. A plan was forming in his mind. A plan that was reckless, selfish, and inevitable. He couldn't let her go back to her cramped, lonely apartment in Capitol Hill. She would die there, and if she died, the music would die. Elysium would lose its soul. "I'll take care of her," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a solemn register. "I have a house. It's quiet. It's safe. I'll make sure she gets what she needs." Dr. Harrison looked at him skeptically. "Are you family?" I'm her partner," Ethan lied. The lie tasted sweet on his tongue. It felt like a promotion. The ghost in the kitchen. Sarah stood in the centre of the kitchen, staring at the pot of soup simmering on the stove. It was a simple chicken broth made from scratch. The steam rose in curling wisps, filling the cold glass house with a scent that should have been comforting, but instead felt cloying. She checked the clock on the microwave. 7:30 in the evening. Ethan hadn't called. He had missed dinner. He had missed the time he usually came home to celebrate a win, and they had won. Sarah had received the notification email 2 hours ago. The client was blown away by the lighting specs and the budget efficiency. They wanted to move forward immediately. It was a victory that belonged to her as much as to him, perhaps more. But she stood alone in the silence, celebrating with a glass of water and a handful of pills. The pain in her bones was a deep, dull ache tonight, like a toothache in her skeleton. She had wrapped a thick woolen shawl around her shoulders, trying to stop the shivering that came from the anemia. Her body was starving for oxygen, and every movement felt like wading through deep water. She walked to the window and looked out at the dark driveway. The rain had turned into a storm. The wind whipped the trees, bending them into submission. Suddenly, headlights cut through the darkness. 2 bright beams swept across the living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Sarah's heart leapt. He was home. She quickly smoothed her hair, pinched her cheeks to bring some colour into them, and turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the soft glow of the dining area lamps. She wanted to set the mood. She wanted tonight to be gentle. She needed to tell him about Dr. Evans. She needed to tell him that she needed the money from the emergency fund, the fund she had built by scrimping on groceries, by wearing old clothes, by denying herself everything for 5 years. She heard the garage door open, the rumble of the Porsche engine dying down. Then the sound of voices. Voices? Sarah froze. Ethan was talking to someone. The front door opened. A gust of cold, wet wind blew into the hallway. "Careful. Watch the step." Ethan's voice was tender, solicitous, a tone Sarah hadn't heard directed at her in years. Ethan walked in, but he wasn't alone. He was supporting a woman. She was wrapped in Ethan's trench coat, looking small and frail. Her hair was damp, plastered to her forehead. It was the woman from the website, the violinist, Maya. Sarah stood paralysed by the kitchen island, her hand gripping the cold marble counter. She felt a sudden, sharp vertigo. "Ethan?" she whispered. Ethan looked up, startled, as if he had forgotten Sarah lived there. His eyes were wide, filled with a frantic, manic energy. "Sarah," he said, breathless. "Thank God you're here. We have a situation." He guided Maya to the large plush sofa in the living room, helping her sit down with the care one would handle a Ming vase. He knelt before her, taking her shoes off. "Are you okay? Is the breathing easier?" Ethan asked the woman, ignoring his wife completely. Maya nodded weakly. She looked up, her large, dark eyes locking onto Sarah. There was no apology in them, only a vague curiosity and a shimmering layer of pain. "I'm sorry to intrude," Maya said, her voice a breathy whisper. Ethan stood up and finally turned to Sarah. He walked over to the kitchen, lowering his voice. "Sarah, this is Maya. She collapsed at the office today. It was terrifying. Her heart stopped. Literally stopped." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the open door. "Is she okay? Why isn't she in the hospital?" "They discharged her, but she can't be alone," Ethan explained, his hands gesturing wildly. "She has a severe heart condition. She lives in a 4th-floor walk-up with no elevator. It would be a death sentence to send her back there. I couldn't do it. I couldn't just leave her." "So you brought her here?" Sarah asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and awkward. "It's just for a few days," Ethan said, defensiveness creeping into his tone. "Until we figure out the surgery logistics. This house is perfect for recovery. It's quiet. The air filtration is top-notch. And you're here." "I'm here?" "Yes. You're home all day," Ethan said, as if this were a logical conclusion. "You can keep an eye on her while I'm at the office. Just make sure she doesn't overexert herself. Make sure she eats." Sarah stared at him. The absurdity of it was suffocating. She was dying. She was bleeding internally. She was the one who needed care. She was the one who needed a calm environment. And now, her husband had brought his mistress, or his muse, whatever label he used to sanitize the betrayal, into their sanctuary and asked his dying wife to nurse her. "Ethan," Sarah said, her voice trembling, I'm not feeling well myself." Ethan frowned, the lines on his forehead deepening. "Sarah, please. Not right now. Don't make this about you. Look at her." He pointed to Maya, who was coughing softly on the sofa, looking tragic and beautiful. "She almost died in my arms today. Can you imagine that? Can you have a little compassion?" Compassion. The word struck Sarah like a slap, and she had given him 5 years of compassion. She had given him her bone marrow, though he didn't know it. She had given him her dignity. "I'm just tired," Sarah whispered, retreating. She didn't have the energy to fight. The hemoglobin in her blood was too low to fuel rage. It only fueled a deep, crushing sadness. "We all are," Ethan said, dismissing her pain. "Is there food? She needs to eat something light. Soup would be good." "There's chicken soup on the stove," Sarah said mechanically. "Perfect." Ethan smiled, relieved. "You're an angel, Sarah. Really." He turned back to the living room. "Maya, hold on. Sarah made soup. It's going to make you feel better." Sarah watched him go. She watched him fluff a pillow behind Maya's head. She watched him touch her cheek to check her temperature. She turned back to the stove. Her hands were shaking so badly that the ladle rattled against the pot. She poured a bowl of soup. She placed it on a tray. She added a napkin and a spoon. She felt like a ghost in her own life, serving the living. The dinner of silence. The dining table was long enough to seat 12 people, but tonight it was an intimate triangle of tension. Ethan sat at the head, Maya on his right and Sarah on his left. Ethan was in a state of high vibration. He talked incessantly, filling the silence that threatened to swallow them whole. He talked about the Elysium project, about the divine intervention of the design, about how Maya's music had unlocked the geometry of the roof. "It's going to be a cathedral of sound," Ethan said, waving his fork. "And Maya, when you play the opening night, it will be historic." Maya smiled, a weak, grateful smile. She ate the soup slowly, her eyes darting between Ethan and Sarah. "Sarah, this is delicious," she said softly. "Thank you for letting me crash here. I feel terrible imposing." "It's no trouble," Sarah lied, staring at her own bowl. She couldn't eat. The nausea was rising again. She focused on breathing. In, out. Don't cough. Don't bleed. "It's not an imposition," Ethan insisted. "It's necessary. We need you healthy." He put down his fork and looked at Maya with an intensity that made Sarah look away. "Dr. Harrison told me about the surgery," Ethan said. "The myectomy." Maya lowered her spoon. Her face fell. "Yeah, he mentioned it. He said the best surgeon is in Zurich." "I know," Maya whispered. "De Vogel. I looked him up years ago when I was first diagnosed. But it's impossible. The surgery alone is $150,000. Plus travel, recovery. It's out of the question." "Nothing is out of the question when it comes to your life," Ethan said firmly. Sarah looked up. She saw the look in Ethan's eyes. It was the look of a man who was about to make a grand gesture, a dangerous gesture. "We'll figure it out," Ethan said. "Ethan, you can't," Maya said, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't ask you for that." "You didn't ask," Ethan said. "I'm offering." Sarah felt the room spin. $150,000. That was exactly the amount in the emergency fund. The money she had saved from her inheritance, from freelance editing, from selling the jewellery her mother left her. The money intended for her bone marrow transplant. The money intended to buy her a future. She cleared her throat. The sound was dry and sharp. "Ethan," Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through their moment. Ethan looked at her, annoyed at the interruption. "What? Can we speak? Privately?" Ethan sighed. He checked his watch. "Sarah, Maya is exhausted. Can it wait?" "No," Sarah said. She stood up. Her legs felt like lead. "It can't wait." Ethan rolled his eyes at Maya, a silent apology for his difficult wife. "Excuse me for a second." He followed Sarah into the kitchen. The moment the swinging door closed, his demeanour changed. The tenderness vanished, replaced by irritation. "What is it, Sarah? You're being incredibly weird tonight. Can't you see she's scared?" "I need to talk to you about money," Sarah said, leaning against the counter for support. Ethan threw his hands up. "Money? Now? Jesus, Sarah! I just brought a dying woman into our house and you want to talk about the grocery budget." "It's not the grocery budget," Sarah said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was the summary of the emergency account. "It's about the savings." Ethan snatched the paper. He glanced at it. "The Allianz account, right. There's about 160K in there." "Yes," Sarah said. "I need—" "Actually, I'm glad you brought this up," Ethan interrupted, his eyes lighting up with a manic idea. "I was doing the math in my head. We don't have enough liquid cash in the business account because the retainer hasn't cleared yet. But this is sitting there." Sarah went cold. Ethan, that money... I know, it's the rainy day fund, Ethan said dismissively. But look outside, Sarah. It's pouring. This is the rainy day. Maya needs surgery. If we use this to put a deposit down for the Swiss clinic, we can get her on the list by next week. No, Sarah said. The word was a whisper, but it was firm. Ethan paused. He looked at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. Excuse me? No, Sarah repeated, louder this time. She took a step forward. You cannot use that money for her. Why not? Ethan's voice rose. Are you that selfish? It's money sitting in a bank, Srugge. A human life is at stake. My life is at stake too, Sarah cried out. Ethan laughed. It was a cruel, incredulous laugh. Oh, here we go. The drama. What is it this time? A migraine. You're tired. You're jealous, Sarah. That's what this is. You see a beautiful, talented woman who is actually suffering, and you can't stand that the attention isn't on you. I have bone marrow failure, Ethan, Sarah screamed. The silence that followed was absolute. The refrigerator hummed. The rain beat against the window. Ethan stared at her. For a second, Sarah thought he heard her. She thought he understood. Then he shook his head, a look of pure disgust crossing his face. Bone marrow failure, he repeated, mocking her. Last month it was chronic fatigue. The month before that it was anemia. You're a hypochondriac, Sarah. You always have been. You read things on the internet, and you convince yourself you have them. I have the blood tests, Sarah said, reaching for the pocket where her phone was. Evans called today. Stop it, Ethan snapped. He stepped closer, towering over her. Just stop. I'm sick of your neediness. I am dealing with a real crisis here. Maya's heart is physically deformed. It's on an MRI. It's real. Your mysterious ailments are in your head because you're unhappy and you're bored. He shoved the paper with the bank account balance into his pocket. I'm using the money, he declared. I'm transferring it tomorrow. We will make it back when the Elysium project pays out. But I am not going to let her die because you want to hoard cash for some imaginary illness. It's my money, Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. It's my inheritance. It's our money, Ethan corrected. We're married. Whatever is yours is mine. And right now, I'm making the executive decision. He turned his back on her. Ethan, please, Sarah begged, sinking to her knees. The physical weakness was overtaking her. If you take that money, I will die. I can't wait for the project money. I don't have time. Ethan didn't look back. He pushed through the swinging door, back to the living room, back to the light, back to Maya. Sarah was left alone on the kitchen floor. She curled into a ball, clutching her stomach. The pain was excruciating, but the betrayal hurt more. He didn't just choose another woman. He chose her narrative over Sarah's reality. He chose the beautiful tragedy over the ugly, inconvenient truth. She coughed, and this time she didn't bother to cover her mouth. Blood splattered onto the pristine white tiles of the kitchen floor. She stared at the red drops. They looked like little rubies. He thinks I'm lying, she thought. He thinks I'm making it up. She slowly pulled herself up. She grabbed a wet rag and wiped the blood from the floor. She had to keep the house clean. That was her job. She walked to the door and listened. She heard Ethan's voice, low and soothing, in the other room. It's going to be okay, Maya. I handled it. We have the funding. You're going to Switzerland. "Oh, Ethan," Maya's voice sobbed. "You're saving my life." Sarah leaned her head against the doorframe and closed her eyes. He is saving a life, she thought bitterly. Just not mine. The document of surrender. Late that night, the house was finally quiet. Ethan had set Maya up in the guest room, the room with the best view of the ocean. He had stayed with her until she fell asleep, then retreated to his study. Sarah sat in the master bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed. She had not changed out of her clothes. The door opened. Ethan walked in. He looked exhausted, but righteous. He held a document in his hand. "I need you to sign this," he said, not meeting her eyes. Sarah looked at the paper. It was a transfer authorization form from the bank. It required both their signatures to liquidate the joint savings account, the account where she had parked her inheritance. "Ethan, don't start," he warned. "I've booked the flight for her. We leave in 2 days. I need the funds cleared by morning." "You're going with her?" "Of course I'm going. She can't travel alone. I'll be gone for a week, maybe 2. You can handle the firm while I'm gone. The interns know what to do." He placed the paper on the nightstand and a pen on top of it. "Sign it, Sarah, and be a good person. For once, think about someone else." Think about someone else. The words echoed in her mind. She thought about the 5 years she spent nursing him back to health. She thought about the nights she slept in a chair at the hospital. She thought about the kidney she gave him, the scar on her abdomen that he never looked at anymore because he found it unsightly. She thought about the thousands of hours she worked to rebuild his career. She looked at his face. It was a handsome face, but it was a stranger's face. The man she loved had died in that car accident 5 years ago. This man was just a ghost who consumed everything in his path. If she didn't sign, he would hate her. He would blame her if Maya died. He would never forgive her. And perhaps, deep down, she still loved him enough to want him to be the hero, even if it cost her everything. Or perhaps she was just too tired to fight. She picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. "If I sign this," Sarah said softly, "will you promise me one thing?" "What?" Ethan asked, impatient. "Will you promise to look at the Elysium structural files again? Carefully?" Ethan scoffed. "Seriously? That's what you care about? The files? Just promise." "Fine. I promise. Now sign." Sarah pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed black and permanent. She signed her name. Sarah Caldwell. With that signature, she signed away her treatment. She signed away her cure. "Thank you," Ethan said, snatching the paper. "You did the right thing." He turned off the light and got into bed. He turned his back to her immediately. Within minutes, he was asleep. Sarah lay awake in the dark. She listened to his breathing. She listened to the rain. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stay here and die slowly. She couldn't wither away in the corner while he played the hero for Maya. She couldn't let him watch her rot and look at her with that mixture of pity and disgust. If she was going to die, she would do it on her own terms. She would not be a burden. She would not be the hypochondriac wife. She would be a memory. She waited until 3:00 a.m. She got up silently. She packed a small bag. No clothes, just her journals, her remaining medication, and a few photos of her parents. She went to his study. On his desk, right next to his beloved architectural models, she placed a small, worn velvet box. It was the box that contained the truth, the medical records from 5 years ago, the donor forms, the proof of what she had given him. She didn't leave a note. The box was the note. She walked to the front door. She put on her coat and boots. She opened the door. The wind howled, inviting her into the storm. She looked back at the glass house one last time. It glowed faintly in the dark, beautiful and cold. A monument to a man's ego built on a woman's bones. "Goodbye, Ethan," she whispered. She stepped out into the rain. The door clicked shut behind her. By the time the sun rose, Sarah was gone. The art of leaving. The morning sun did not rise in Seattle. The grey simply became a lighter shade of grey. Inside the glass house, the silence was absolute. It was not the peaceful silence of a library, but the heavy, pressurised silence of a vacuum. Ethan woke up with the jolt of adrenaline that had become his baseline state since Maya's collapse. He sat up, checking the time. 6 a.m. The flight to Zurich departed at 10. They had to leave the house in 45 minutes to beat the traffic. He looked at the other side of the king-sized bed. It was made, perfectly smooth. The pillow was unindented. Sarah hadn't slept there. "Typical," Ethan muttered, throwing off the duvet. He assumed she had slept in the guest room, or perhaps on the sofa, nursing her grudge. He felt a flicker of annoyance. Today was a day of life and death, a day of heroism, and she was making it about her hurt feelings. He walked into the bathroom. His travel kit was not packed. Usually, Sarah had it ready on the counter. Toothpaste, razor, his specific face cream, and the vitamins he always forgot to take. Today, the counter was bare. "Sarah," he called out, opening the door to the hallway. His voice echoed against the hard surfaces of the house. No answer. He walked down the hall to the guest room where Maya was sleeping. He knocked softly. "Maya, are you awake?" A weak, groggy voice answered. "Yes, I'm up." "We leave in 30. I'll make coffee." Ethan went downstairs. The kitchen was cold. There was no smell of brewing coffee. The blinds were still drawn. The dirty dishes from last night, the soup bowls, the spoons, were still in the sink, unwashed. This was unprecedented. Sarah was obsessive about a clean sink. He felt a spike of anger. "She's really doing this," he thought. "She's going on strike because I used the money." He grabbed the French press and started making the coffee himself, spilling grounds on the counter in his haste. He slammed the cupboard door. "Fine," he hissed. "Be that way." He walked to the study to grab his passport from the safe. The door was ajar. He stepped in and froze. The desk was clear. Usually it was piled high with Elysium blueprints, specs, and invoices that Sarah was organising. Now it was just a sleek surface of walnut wood. In the centre of the desk sat a small, worn velvet box. It was a deep, dusty blue, the colour of an old bruise. Ethan frowned. He recognised the box. It was an old jewellery box Sarah's grandmother had given her. He walked over and picked it up. It felt heavy. He was about to open it when his phone rang. It was the private car service. "Mr. Caldwell, we are outside. Traffic is building up on I-5. We need to leave now if you want to make the international terminal." "I'm coming," Ethan said. He looked at the box, then at the clock. He didn't have time for Sarah's dramatic gestures. Whatever was in the box, a returned wedding ring, a sentimental letter, a bill, could wait. He shoved the box into the top drawer of his desk and locked it. "I'll deal with you when I get back," he said to the empty room. He grabbed his passport and ran back upstairs. Maya was waiting in the hallway, looking pale but beautiful in a cream-coloured sweater. She held her violin case like a shield. "Is Sarah coming to say goodbye?" Maya asked, looking around nervously. "She's out," Ethan lied smoothly. "She went to the market early. She sends her love and hopes the surgery goes well." "That's sweet of her," Maya said, relief washing over her face. "She's a good person, Ethan." "Yeah," Ethan said, guiding her towards the door. "She's very practical. Come on." They walked out into the rain. Ethan didn't look back. He didn't see that the house keys were sitting on the console table by the door, abandoned. He didn't see the emptiness. He only saw the road ahead, and the glory of saving the woman he believed was his destiny. The white mountains. The week in Zurich was a blur of sterile white walls, expensive Swiss efficiency, and the intoxicating rush of being a saviour. The private Clinic Hirslanden, looked more like a 5-star hotel than a hospital. It sat on a hill overlooking the lake, surrounded by snow-capped mountains that pierced the blue sky. The air was crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the damp heaviness of Seattle. Ethan was in his element. He charmed the nurses. He spoke with Dr. Vogel about the architecture of the heart, using metaphors that made the surgeon nod in appreciation. He paid the deposit with the debit card linked to the joint savings account. The transaction went through instantly. $150,000. Gone. He felt a momentary twinge of guilt as he saw the receipt, thinking of Sarah's face when she begged him not to. But then he looked at Maya, lying in the hospital bed, holding his hand, her eyes filled with adoration, and the guilt vanished. "I did the right thing," he told himself. "Money is renewable. Life is not." The surgery was long, 8 hours. Ethan sat in the waiting room, sketching. He designed a new wing for the Elysium project, a recovery garden, inspired by the Swiss landscape. He felt creative, unleashed. When Dr. Vogel came out, pulling off his surgical cap, he was smiling. "It was a success," the surgeon said. "We removed the obstruction. Her heart is pumping freely. She will have a normal lifespan." Ethan exhaled, a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He called the office in Seattle. "It's done," he told the interns. "She's safe." "That's amazing, boss," the intern cheered. "By the way, we have a few red flags on the structural permit. The city inspector is asking for the updated seismic load calculations. Sarah usually handles that." "Just tell them it's coming," Ethan said, dismissive. "I'm in Switzerland. I can't look at spreadsheets. Tell Sarah to email them." We emailed Sarah," the intern said, hesitant. "But she hasn't replied. Her auto-reply isn't on. Is she with you?" "No, she's in Seattle," Ethan said, annoyed. "She's probably just taking a few days off. She was feeling under the weather. I'll text her." He hung up and opened his messaging app. "Ethan, surgery was a success. She's alive. I know you're angry, but please check the city permit emails. The team needs you. Don't let the business suffer just to punish me." He hit send. delivered. He watched the screen, waiting for the read indicator. It didn't appear. He waited an hour. Still nothing. He tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's me. Pick up. This is childish. I get it. You're mad about the money. We will earn it back. But you need to send the seismic data. Call me." He didn't think much of it. Sarah was passive-aggressive, and this was her way of exerting control. She wanted him to beg. He wouldn't give her the satisfaction. He spent the next 5 days by Maya's bedside. Her recovery was miraculous. Her colour returned. She sat up. She ate. She laughed. "I feel light," Maya said, placing a hand over her chest. "I've never felt this light. It's like a weight has been lifted." "You have a new heart," Ethan smiled, stroking her hair. "Because of you," she whispered. "You gave me this." Ethan basked in the praise. He felt like a god. He stopped calling Sarah after the 3rd day. If she wanted to play the silent game, he could play it longer. He was busy saving a life. The return to the tomb. 10 days after they left, Ethan and Maya returned to Seattle. Maya was still weak, needing a wheelchair to get through the airport, but she was stable. She had a bag full of expensive Swiss chocolates and a new lease on life. The car service dropped them off at the glass house at 8 in the evening. It was raining again. The house was dark. Not just dim, completely dark. No porch light. No landscape lighting. It looked like a black hole cut into the side of the cliff. "Looks like she went to bed early," Ethan said, trying to sound casual, but a prickle of unease crawled up his spine. He helped Maya out of the car. "Careful, it's slippery." They walked to the front door. Ethan reached for his keys, then remembered he had left his set in his other jacket. He rang the doorbell. Ding dong. The sound echoed inside, hollow and lonely. No movement. No lights flicking on. "Maybe she's out," Maya suggested, shivering in the damp air. "At 8 p.m. on a Tuesday?" "Sarah never goes out," Ethan scoffed. He rang the bell again. Then he pounded on the door. "Sarah, open up. We're back." Silence. Damn it. Ethan dug through his luggage, finding his spare key. He jammed it into the lock and twisted. The door swung open. The air inside was stale. It smelled cold and dusty, lacking the usual scent of lemon polish and fresh flowers that Sarah maintained. The house felt abandoned. Ethan flipped the light switch. The hallway flooded with harsh LED light. Everything was exactly as he had left it 10 days ago. The mail was piled up on the floor beneath the mail slot, a mountain of envelopes. The coffee grounds he had spilled on the counter 10 days ago were still there, now dry and crusty. The dirty dishes from the soup night were still in the sink. A layer of mould had started to grow on the leftover broth. The plants in the living room, Sarah's beloved orchids, were drooping, their leaves brown and shriveled. "What the hell?" Ethan whispered. Maya walked in behind him, wrinkling her nose. "It smells weird in here. Did she go on vacation?" Ethan dropped his bags. Panic began to replace his annoyance. Sarah never left a mess. Sarah never let the plants die. Sarah never let the mail pile up. "Sarah!" he shouted, his voice cracking. He ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. He burst into the master bedroom. The bed was still made, untouched since the morning he left. The closet door was closed. He ran to the bathroom. Her toothbrush was gone. The counter was wiped clean. He ran to the guest rooms. Empty. He ran back downstairs. Maya was standing in the kitchen, looking at the mouldy dishes with disgust. "Ethan, this is gross," she said. "Did she really leave it like this?" Ethan didn't answer. He was spinning in circles in the living room, his mind trying to process the visual data. The house wasn't just messy, it was purged. The framed photos on the mantelpiece, photos of their wedding, photos of them at galas, were gone. The frames were there, face down, but the photos inside had been removed. "She's gone," Ethan whispered. "What do you mean?" Maya asked, picking up a dead orchid leaf. "She's not here. She hasn't been here." "Maybe she went to her parents." "Her parents are dead." "A friend?" "She doesn't have friends. She only has meat." Ethan felt a sudden, crushing weight in his chest. He pulled out his phone and dialed the landline. The phone on the kitchen wall rang, loud, shrill, unanswered. He checked the call log on the caller ID, so missed calls. No one had called the house except him. He turned to the pile of mail on the floor. He kicked it apart. Bills, circulars, a letter from the city regarding the Elysium permit. Final notice. Seismic data overdue. Permit revocation imminent. Ethan stared at the red letters. Permit revocation. "She didn't send it," he murmured. "She didn't do the work." "Ethan?" Maya touched his arm. "You're scaring me." Ethan shook her off. He was angry now. A hot, blinding rage. How could she? How could she abandon the business? How could she abandon him, right when he was bringing home a victory? It was the ultimate act of sabotage. "She's doing this to punish me." Ethan paced the kitchen, kicking a chair. "She knew the permit was due, and she knew the mail would pile up. She wanted me to come home to a disaster. It's spite, pure spite." "Maybe something happened to her," Maya suggested softly. "Like what? She got kidnapped?" Ethan laughed darkly. "No. Nothing happens to Sarah. Sarah is the most careful, boring person on earth. She planned this. Look." He pointed to the empty spot on the wall where a painting used to hang, a painting she had bought with her first paycheck. Gone. She took her stuff. She walked out. Ethan marched to his study. He needed a drink. He needed to think. He slammed the study door open. The air here was even colder. He sat down at his desk, sweeping the dust off the surface. He opened the bottom drawer to get the whiskey bottle. He poured a glass and downed it in one gulp. The burn felt good. It grounded him. Then his eyes fell on the top drawer, the one he had locked before he left. The box. He remembered the blue velvet box she had left on the desk, the one he was too busy to open. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the key. He unlocked the drawer. The box was there, sitting in the darkness, waiting for him. He took it out. It was heavy, heavier than it looked. "Okay, Sarah," he whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. "Let's see what your little parting gift is. A letter telling me what a bastard I am. A divorce petition." He unlatched the clasp. It made a soft click in the silent room. He opened the lid. There was no jewellery inside, no diamond rings. On top lay a single, folded piece of paper. It was a letter from Seattle Grace Hospital, Hematology Department. Ethan picked it up. The date was from 2 weeks ago. Patient: Sarah Caldwell. Diagnosis: aplastic anemia, severe, secondary bone marrow. Failure. Notes: patient has refused hospitalisation due to financial constraints and lack of spousal support system. Condition is critical. Without immediate bone marrow transplant, prognosis is less than 3 months. Ethan read the words, but they didn't make sense. Aplastic anemia, bone marrow failure. Hypochondriac. His own voice echoed in his memory. You're a hypochondriac, Sarah. His hands started to shake violently. The paper rattled. He dropped the letter and looked deeper into the box. Beneath the medical report was a thick leather-bound notebook. He recognised it. It was her household ledger. Sarah wrote down every penny spent. He opened it to the bookmark. It wasn't just grocery lists. It was a log of transactions from 5 years ago, the year of his accident. Date: Oct. 12, 2020. Item: Ethan's surgery. Co-pay. Cost: $12,000. Source: sold mother's pearl necklace. Date: NOV 15, 2020. Item: Ethan's physical therapy. Private. Cost: $4,500. Source: cashed out. 401k. Date: Dec 20, 2020. Item: settlement for Ethan's gambling debt. Undisclosed to him. Cost: $55,000. Source: sold rental property on 4th Street. Ethan stared at the numbers. The handwriting was neat, precise, devoid of emotion. But the numbers screamed. He had always thought insurance covered everything. He thought his investments had paid off the debts. He thought he was lucky. She had sold everything. She had stripped herself bare to keep his illusion of success intact. And at the very bottom of the box, beneath the ledger, was a small, transparent plastic bag. Inside was a lock of hair, her hair, and a USB drive labelled, "For when you are ready to build again." Ethan sat back in his chair. The silence of the house was no longer empty. It was screaming. He looked at the date on the medical diagnosis again. Prognosis: less than 3 months. That was 2 weeks ago. He had taken the money, her money, the money that could have bought her those 3 months, or maybe a cure, and he had spent it on Maya. Ethan? Maya stood in the doorway of the study. She looked concerned. Are you okay? You've been in here for a while. Ethan looked up at her. He looked at her healthy, glowing skin. He looked at her chest, rising and falling rhythmically with the strong beat of a healed heart. He saw the price tag attached to her life. $150,000. And Sarah. She's dying, Ethan whispered. The words came out like broken glass. What? Maya stepped closer. Sarah, Ethan said, his voice rising to a shout. She's not sulking. She's not at the market. She's dying. She has bone marrow failure. He threw the medical letter at Maya. It fluttered to the floor between them. And Ethan grabbed his hair, pulling it hard, trying to wake himself up from this nightmare. I took her money. I took her money to save you. Maya recoiled, her hand covering her mouth. Ethan. I didn't know. I knew, Ethan roared. He stood up, knocking the chair over. She told me, in the kitchen. She told me she was sick. She told me she needed the money, and I told her she was a liar. I told her she was jealous. He fell to his knees in the middle of the room, surrounded by the dust of his own neglect. I signed her death warrant, he sobbed. I killed her. The house amplified his sobs, bouncing them off the glass walls, out towards the dark, indifferent ocean. He scrambled for his phone. He dialed Dr. Evans, the name on the letterhead. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Dr. Evans speaking. This is Ethan Caldwell, he gasped. Sarah's husband. Where is she? Is she with you? There was a long pause on the other end, a pause that judged him. Mr. Caldwell, the doctor's voice was ice cold. We have been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. Mrs. Caldwell checked herself out of our care 10 days ago. She stated that she could no longer afford the treatment. Where did she go? Ethan screamed. We don't know, Dr. Evans said. She left against medical advice. She said she was going somewhere to rest. She said she didn't want to be a burden. The line went dead. Ethan dropped the phone. He looked at the dark window. His reflection stared back at him. A man who had gained the world and lost his soul. She was gone. She was sick. She was alone. And she had vanished into the rain, leaving him with his perfect house, his perfect muse, and his perfect, unbearable guilt. The echo chamber. The rain had stopped, replaced by a thick, suffocating fog that rolled off the Puget Sound and wrapped the glass house in a white shroud. It was the kind of morning where the world felt small, limited to the few feet in front of your face. Inside, the house was no longer a sanctuary of minimalism. It was a crime scene of emotional wreckage. Ethan sat on the floor of his study. He hadn't slept. His eyes were red-rimmed, burning with the dry grit of exhaustion. Around him, the contents of the blue velvet box were spread out like tarot cards of a doomed fortune. The medical letter, a plastic anemia, the ledger, sold mother's pearl necklace, the USB drive, for when you are ready. He picked up the lock of hair in the plastic bag. It was dark, silky, threaded with a few strands of premature grey. He remembered teasing her about those grey hairs. He had told her she was ageing too fast. He had told her to dye it because it ruined the aesthetic of their public image. Now, holding it, he realised those grey hairs were the scars of the stress he had inflicted upon her. Every grey hair was a bill paid, a crisis averted, a secret kept. Ethan? Maya's voice drifted from the kitchen. It was tentative, scared. Ethan didn't answer. He carefully placed the hair back in the box. He felt a strange possessiveness over it. It was the only piece of Sarah he had left. Ethan, please. Maya appeared at the door. She was wearing one of his oversized dress shirts. It looked wrong on her. It looked like a costume. You have to eat something. You haven't had anything since we got back last night. I'm not hungry, Ethan croaked. His voice sounded like it belonged to an old man. You have a meeting at 10, Maya reminded him gently. The Elysium investors. They want to sign the final contracts. Ethan looked at her. For a split second, he didn't recognise her. She wasn't the glowing muse of yesterday. She was just a woman. A woman who was alive because his wife was dying. A woman who cost $150,000. I can't go, Ethan said. You have to, Maya urged, stepping into the room. She tried to touch his shoulder. Ethan flinched away violently. Don't. Maya froze, hurt flashing across her face. Ethan, I know you're upset. I know it's a shock, but you can't just stop. Sarah wouldn't want you to destroy the business. She worked for it too, right? Don't say her name, Ethan whispered. You don't get to say her name. I'm trying to help, Maya cried, her voice rising. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask you to steal her money. You told me it was yours. You told me she was fine. I lied! Ethan slammed his fist on the desk. The sound was like a gunshot. I lied to you. I lied to myself. And now she's out there, bleeding, alone, and I am sitting here with you. The implication hung in the air. I am stuck with you. Maya stepped back, tears welling up. I'm sorry I'm alive, Ethan. Is that what you want to hear? I'm sorry my heart is beating and hers is failing. But I can't give it back. It's done. She turned and ran out of the room. Ethan heard the bedroom door slam upstairs. He put his head in his hands. She was right. It was done. The money was in a Swiss bank account. The surgery was performed. The transaction was irreversible. He looked at the clock. 8:30. He had to find her. He had to reverse the entropy. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number of the only person he knew who dealt with dirt and secrets. Vance, Ethan said when the line clicked. I need you. Now. The transaction of guilt. Michael Vance was not a man who fit into Ethan's architectural world. He was a private investigator who operated out of a strip mall office in South Seattle between a vape shop and a payday lender. He smelled of stale tobacco and cheap cologne. But he was good. He had helped Ethan clear a zoning issue years ago by finding leverage on a city councilman. Sarah had hated him. She called him a moral vacuum. Vance sat in Ethan's living room, looking out of place on the Italian leather sofa. He didn't take off his wet raincoat. He held a notepad. So, Vance said, his voice gravelly. The wife is gone. Taken the car? No, Ethan said, pacing by the window. Her car is in the garage. She left on foot. Or took a cab. Phone? Left it here, along with her laptop and credit cards. Vance whistled low. Clean break. That takes planning. Usually, when people run, they take a debit card, a phone. If she left the digital leash behind, she doesn't want to be found. She's sick, Vance, Ethan said, stopping his pacing. She has a plastic anemia. She needs a transfusion every few weeks or she dies. She can't just disappear. She needs a hospital. So we check the hospitals, Vance scribbled. Local first, then state. But if she checked out against medical advice, she might be using a fake name. Does she have cash? Ethan hesitated. The shame rose up in his throat like bile. No, she had a savings account, a large one, but it's empty. Vance looked up, his eyes narrowing. Empty? Did she drain it before she left? No. Ethan whispered. I did. Vance paused. He tapped his pen against his teeth, studying Ethan. He saw the tremor in Ethan's hands. He saw the desperation, and he understood. I see, Vance said dryly. Domestic dispute over finances? I took the money to pay for a surgery, Ethan confessed. He gestured vaguely upstairs. For a friend. Sarah wanted to keep the money for her own treatment. I didn't believe she was sick. I took it. Vance stopped writing. He stared at Ethan for a long, uncomfortable moment. Even a man who dug up dirt for a living looked disgusted. You took her dying money to pay for a girlfriend, Vance summarised brutally. It wasn't like that, Ethan defended weakly. I didn't know. It doesn't matter what you knew, Vance said, standing up. It matters what she thinks. She thinks you left her for dead. That's a powerful motivator, Mr. Caldwell. A woman like that, she's not running away. She's going somewhere to die in peace. Somewhere you can't hurt her anymore. Just find her, Ethan pleaded. I don't care what it costs. Find her before it's too late. It's going to cost you, Vance said. Double my rate. I don't like working for guys like you, but I like money. Fine. Double. Triple. Just find her. Vance nodded. I'll pull the traffic cam footage from the main road. If she walked, a camera saw her. I'll check the bus depots and the train station. Give me a recent photo. Ethan pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his gallery. Selfie of him at an award show. Photo of the Elysium model. Photo of Maya playing the violin. Photo of his car. He scrolled back. 1 month. 2 months. 6 months. A year. He couldn't find a single photo of Sarah. There were photos by Sarah, but no photos of Sarah. She had become the cameraman of his life, invisible behind the lens. Ethan stammered, I don't have one on my phone. Vance raised an eyebrow. You don't have a picture of your wife? She doesn't like photos, Ethan lied. She's camera shy. Right, Vance said, dripping with sarcasm. Check the house. A wedding album? A passport copy? Ethan ran to the study. He found a photocopy of her driver's licence in the filing cabinet. It was a grainy black and white image. Sarah looked tired, even in the photo. He handed it to Vance. I'll get to work, Vance said, pocketing the paper. But Mr. Caldwell, don't get your hopes up. If she's as sick as you say and she has no money, the clock isn't ticking, it's sprinting. Vance walked out. The door clicked shut. Ethan was alone again. Except for the sound of the violin starting up upstairs. A mournful, slow melody. Maya was playing. Ethan covered his ears. It sounded like a funeral dirge. The glass castle cracks. Ethan drove to the office at 10. He had to. The Elysium contract signing was the only thing keeping him from total collapse. If he lost the project, he lost the means to fix this. He needed money to pay Vance. He needed money to buy Sarah the best treatment once he found her. He walked into the office. The atmosphere was buzzing. The interns were high-fiving. The investors, 3 men in grey suits, were sitting in the conference room looking at the 3D model. Ethan, the lead investor, Mr. Sterling, stood up. He was a man who respected success and nothing else. There he is, the visionary, We were just admiring the cantilever design. Daring. Thank you, Ethan said. He forced a smile. It felt like his face was made of clay. It's all about balance. We have the papers ready, Sterling said. But my engineer had one final question about the wind load on the glass atrium. The data in the appendix seems to reference a Z-curve calculation. We've never seen that before. Can you walk us through it? Ethan froze. Z-curve. He remembered Sarah muttering about Z-curves 3 weeks ago at the dinner table. He had been checking his Instagram. He hadn't listened. Ah, Ethan said. Sweat prickled his hairline. The Z-curve. Yes, it's a proprietary method to maximize light refraction while maintaining structural integrity. Interesting, the engineer said, squinting at the file. But looking at the numbers, if the wind hits 50 miles per hour from the north, the stress point here seems critical. Did you run a simulation for a nor'easter storm? Of course, Ethan lied. We ran hundreds of simulations. Can we see the raw data? The engineer pressed, just for peace of mind before we sign a $40 million check. The raw data? Ethan looked at the intern, Jason. Jason looked panicked. The raw data is on the server, boss, in the folder Sarah manages. Right, Ethan said. Sarah manages the data archives. Let me just pull it up. He sat down at the conference computer. He logged in. He clicked on the folder. Project Elysium. Engineering. Simulations. The folder was empty. There was a single text file inside named Check the Cloud Backup. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Sarah didn't trust the local server. She always backed up to a secure cloud, a cloud that required a password. He clicked the link. A password prompt appeared. Enter password. Ethan typed Elysium 2025. Access denied. He typed Ethan, Sarah. Access denied. He typed Caldwell Design. Access denied. Is there a problem? Sterling asked, checking his watch. Just a technical glitch, Ethan said. His hands were shaking. My wife, my partner, she handles the encryption. She changed the password recently for security. Call her, Sterling said. We can wait. I can't, Ethan said. She's unreachable. Unreachable? Sterling frowned. During a closing meeting. She had a medical emergency, Ethan blurted out. She's indisposed. I'm sorry to hear that, Sterling said, his tone cooling. But Ethan, we need that data. Without the stress test confirmation, we can't insure the building. If we can't insure it, we can't build it. I can verify it manually, Ethan insisted. I know the math. Do you? The engineer asked softly. Because this looks like complex calculus. It would take days to rederive. Ethan stared at the screen. The blinking cursor mocked him. He didn't know the math. He hadn't done complex calculus in 5 years. Sarah did the math. Sarah did the logic. Sarah made him look like a genius while he drew pretty shapes on a napkin. Ethan swallowed hard. I will get it to you by tomorrow morning. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Tomorrow morning, Ethan. Or we go to the next firm on the list. We like the design, but we don't like risk. They walked out. The office was silent. The interns stared at Ethan. They had never seen him fail. They had never seen him sweat. "Jason," Ethan barked. "Get me the password cracker. Call it." "It is, well, Sarah is the admin for the IT account too, boss," Jason whispered. Ethan picked up a glass paperweight and hurled it at the wall. It shattered, sending shards of glass everywhere. "Useless!" he screamed. "You are all useless!" He stormed into his office and slammed the door. He slumped into his chair, staring at the phone. He needed the password. He needed Sarah. He opened his email and typed a new message to her. Subject: password. "Sarah, I need the cloud password for Elysium, now. Don't be petty. This is the business. This is our livelihood. If we lose this, we lose everything. Just send the code." He hit send. Then, immediately, he felt a wave of self-loathing so strong it made him dizzy. He was asking the woman he had robbed and abandoned to save his business. He was still using her. Even in her absence, he was trying to extract value from her. He put his head on the desk and wept. Not for her, for himself. For the pathetic, hollow man he turned out to be. The intruder in the sanctuary, Ethan returned home at 3 p.m. He couldn't stay at the office. The staring eyes of the interns were too much. When he walked into the house, something was different. The smell. It didn't smell like mould anymore. It smelled of lavender and heavy chemicals. He walked into the living room. Maya was there. She was moving things. She had taken down the heavy grey curtains Sarah loved. She had replaced them with sheer white sheets she must have found in the linen closet, and she had moved the sofa. She had thrown away the dead orchids. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, his voice low and dangerous. Maya turned around. She was sweating, looking flushed and manic. "I'm cleaning." It was so depressing in here, Ethan. The mould, the dust. It wasn't good for my recovery. Or yours. I thought we needed light. "Where are the orchids?" Ethan asked. "I tossed them," Maya said cheerfully. "They were dead, completely dried out. I ordered some new ones. Lilies. They're coming tomorrow." "You threw them away," Ethan repeated. "Sarah grew those for 3 years. She revived them after the heat wave." "They were dead sticks, Ethan," Maya said, her smile faltering. "Why do you care? You hated those plants. You said they cluttered the view." "I didn't say you could touch her things," Ethan shouted. He walked over to the bookshelf. He noticed something else. The books were rearranged. Sarah organised by author. Maya had rearranged them by colour. "It looks better this way, doesn't it?" Maya said, her voice trembling. "More architectural." "Stop it," Ethan hissed. "Stop trying to erase her." "I'm not trying to erase her," Maya yelled back. "I'm trying to live here. You brought me here, remember? You saved me. But ever since we got back, you treat me like a ghost. You look at me like I'm a disease." "Because you are," Ethan spat the words out before he could stop them. "You are the disease that killed my marriage." Maya gasped. She recoiled as if he had hit her. She clutched her chest, her expensive, surgically repaired chest. "How can you say that?" she whispered. "You loved me. You said I was your muse." "I was drunk on potential," Ethan said cruelly. "I liked the idea of you, but the reality, The reality is that you are just a selfish child who plays the violin. You don't know how to run a life. You don't know how to secure a load-bearing wall. You don't know how to save me." "I thought you saved me," Maya said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't save you," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "Sarah did. Sarah paid for your heart. Every beat it takes. That's her money. That's her life. You are walking around with my wife's life inside your chest." Maya stared at him in horror. The cruelty of the truth washed over her. She looked down at her own body, repulsed. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear I didn't know." "Get out," Ethan said. "What?" "Get out of my sight. Go to your room. Don't touch anything. Don't move anything. Just exist somewhere else." Maya fled. She ran upstairs, her sobs echoing through the open space. Ethan stood in the middle of the rearranged living room. It looked brighter, yes. It looked cleaner. But it felt wrong. It felt like a stage set for a play that had been cancelled. He walked to the trash can outside. He dug through the garbage bags. He found the orchids. Their roots were still tangled in the soil. He picked them up, his hands getting covered in coffee grounds and grime. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the dead plants. "I'm sorry." He carried them back inside and put them back in their pots. He tried to arrange the dead leaves to look like they were still alive. It was a pathetic, futile gesture. But he couldn't stop. The second box night fell. Ethan sat in the kitchen, drinking whiskey from a mug. His phone buzzed. It was Vance. Ethan answered immediately. "Did you find her?" "I found a trace," Vance said. "But you're not going to like it." "Tell me." "I pulled the footage from the Greyhound station downtown. Date, October 14th. That's the day after you left for the airport." "Yes." "She bought a ticket. Cash. One way." "Where to?" Ethan asked, gripping the phone. "Aberdeen," Vance said. "Aberdeen?" Ethan frowned. That's a dead-end town on the coast. Why would she go there? She has no family there." "It's cheap," Vance said. "And it's grim. It's where people go when they don't want to be found. But here's the kicker, Ethan. She didn't get on the bus alone." Ethan's heart stopped. "What? Was she with someone?" "No," Vance said. "She was carrying something. A cat carrier." "We don't have a cat," Ethan said. "Exactly. But she was carrying a carrier. And she had 2 large suitcases. She struggled with them. She fell once on the platform. Nobody helped her. She got up, dusted herself off, and got on the bus." Ethan closed his eyes. He could see it. The image burned into his brain. Sarah, frail, coughing, dragging heavy bags, falling on the dirty concrete, alone. "I have an address in Aberdeen," Vance continued. "It's a motel, the Sea Mist Motor Inn. Real dump. I called the front desk. They have a Jane Smith registered in room 12. Paid up for a month in cash." "I'm going," Ethan said, standing up. "I'm going now." "It's a 3-hour drive, Ethan, and there's a storm warning." "I don't care." "Wait, there's one more thing," Vance said. "I ran a background check on that motel. It's known for transients, And it's right next to a palliative care clinic, a free clinic. Ethan dropped the mug. It didn't break. It just bounced on the floor, spilling amber liquid everywhere. She went there to die, Ethan whispered. Looks like it, Vance said. Go get her, Ethan, before the storm hits. Ethan hung up. He grabbed his keys. He ran to the door, then stopped. He ran back to the study. He unlocked the drawer. He took the blue velvet box. He didn't know why, but he felt he needed it. He ran out to the Porsche. The rain was torrential now, slashing sideways. He revved the engine. He backed out of the driveway, scraping the bumper against the gate. He didn't care. He sped onto the highway, heading south toward the coast, toward Aberdeen, toward the end of the world. As he drove, the windshield wipers slapped a frantic rhythm. Swish, 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 swish. It sounded like a heartbeat, or a countdown. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through Ethan's side, his right side, right where his kidney was, or rather, where her kidney was. It was a phantom pain, psychogenic, but it doubled him over. He gasped, swerving the car. Not now. He gritted his teeth. You don't get to fail now. Work, damn you. He pressed the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. 80, 90, 100. He was racing against the storm, against the disease, against his own sins. The road to nowhere. The highway to Aberdeen was a ribbon of black asphalt, slick with oil and rain, cutting through the dense, towering pine forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was a lonely road, flanked by trees that looked like silent sentinels watching a funeral procession. Ethan drove the Porsche like a weapon. He was doing 90 miles an hour, weaving through the lumber trucks that sprayed dirty mist onto his windshield. The car, a machine designed for dry racetracks and valet stands, struggled for grip. The tyres whined in protest, a high-pitched scream that matched the ringing in Ethan's ears. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with the smell of heated leather and Ethan's own panic. He was sweating, despite the climate control being set to 65 degrees. Come on, he muttered, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Don't you dare stop. Don't you dare break down. He wasn't talking to the car. He was talking to himself. He was talking to the kidney on his right side. The pain was no longer a phantom twinge. It was a dull, rhythmic throb, like a second heartbeat out of sync with his own. It felt hot. It felt angry. It felt as if the organ was trying to reject him, as if Sarah's cells inside his body knew what he had done and were staging a revolt. He reached into the passenger seat and grabbed the bottle of whiskey he had brought from the study. He took a swig, not taking his eyes off the road. The alcohol burned, momentarily numbing the guilt, but the clarity that followed was worse. Vance's words echoed in his head. The Sea Mist Motor Inn. A dump. A place people go to disappear. Why? Why would she go there? Sarah loved comfort. She loved her cashmere throws. She loved her temperature-controlled wine fridge. She loved the silence of the glass house. Why would she drag her dying body to a roadside motel in a logging town that smelled of sawdust and low tide? Because you made home uninhabitable, a voice in his head whispered. Because the glass house was a cage, and you were the jailer. A logging truck ahead of him slammed on its brakes. Red lights flared in the darkness. Ethan stomped on the pedal. The Porsche fishtailed, sliding sideways toward the guardrail. No! He screamed. He yanked the wheel, correcting the skid. The car shuddered, the tyres finding a patch of traction at the last second. He missed the truck's bumper by inches. He missed the guardrail by a breath. He pulled over to the shoulder, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, watching the rain hammer against the glass. He looked at his hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. He looked at the blue velvet box on the passenger seat. It had slid onto the floor during the skid. He picked it up. He opened it again. He took out the lock of hair. He touched it to his lips. "I'm coming, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm coming to take you back. I'll buy you a new house. I'll buy you a hospital if I have to. Just be there." He put the car back in gear and merged onto the highway. He drove slower now. He couldn't afford to die. Not yet. He had a debt to pay. The Sea Mist Motor Inn Aberdeen was a town that had seen better days, and even those days hadn't been great. It was a place of grey skies, peeling paint, and the pervasive smell of wood pulp and salt water. The Sea Mist. Motor Inn sat on the edge of town, facing a desolate stretch of marshland that led out to the ocean, and the neon sign buzzed with a dying flicker. Sea Meaty Mo or Inn. The S and the T were burnt out, leaving it to read Eamite More Inn. The parking lot was cracked and filled with puddles that reflected the orange glow of the street lights. There were only 3 cars, a rusted pickup truck, a sedan with a flat tyre, and now Ethan's gleaming silver Porsche. The contrast was obscene. It looked like a spaceship had landed in a junkyard. Ethan parked in front of the office. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked deranged. His hair was wild, his eyes bloodshot, his expensive shirt stained with whiskey. He didn't care. He stepped out into the rain. The wind here was colder, carrying the bite of the ocean. He walked into the office. A bell chimed, a cheerful ding-ding that felt out of place. The lobby smelled of stale coffee and industrial lemon cleaner. Behind the counter sat a woman who looked like she was carved out of driftwood. She was in her 60s, with skin leathery from a lifetime of coastal wind and eyes that had seen everything and were impressed by nothing. A name tag pinned to her fleece vest read, Mrs. Gable. She looked up from her crossword puzzle. She took in Ethan's suit, his watch, his desperation. She didn't smile. "Can I help you?" Her voice was like sandpaper. "I'm looking for a guest," Ethan said, leaning on the counter. "Room 12, Jane Smith." Mrs. Gable looked back down at her puzzle. "We don't give out information about guests. Privacy policy." "I know she's here," Ethan said, his voice tight. "I know she checked in on the 14th. Look, I'm her husband." Mrs. Gable stopped writing. She looked up again, her gaze sharpening. "Her husband? The Jane Smith in room 12 doesn't have a husband. She said she was a widow." Ethan flinched. A widow. She had killed him off in her story. "We had a misunderstanding," Ethan said. He pulled out his wallet. He didn't have cash, but he had his platinum card. He slapped it on the counter. "I'll pay for her room. I'll pay for the whole motel. Just give me the key." Mrs. Gable looked at the card, then back at Ethan's face. She let out a dry, hacking laugh. "You think this is about money?" she asked. "Mister, look around. Does this look like the Ritz to you? People come here for 2 reasons. To hide or to die. That little lady in room 12, she ain't hiding." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. Is she okay? She's quiet, Mrs. Gable said, her tone softening slightly, but not out of kindness for him. She pays on time. She doesn't make noise. But I hear that cough. I know that cough. My husband had it before the lung cancer took him. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. She drags herself to the vending machine once a day for a bottle of water. She looks like a breeze could blow her away. And you show up in a car that costs more than this building, smelling like a distillery, demanding a key. I need to see her, Ethan pleaded. Please, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I need to fix it. Mrs. Gable studied him. She saw the raw pain in his eyes. She saw the man who was breaking. She didn't leave a key for you, Mrs. Gable said. But I have a master. If I give it to you, it's not because I like you. It's because I don't want her dying alone in that room. Nobody should die alone in a motel room. She reached under the counter and pulled out a heavy brass key with a plastic tag labelled 12. She placed it on the counter. Room 12 is around back, facing the marsh. If she tells you to get out, you get out. Or I call the sheriff. And Sheriff Miller doesn't like fancy cars. Thank you, Ethan whispered. He grabbed the key. Don't thank me, Mrs. Gable muttered as he turned to leave. Just try not to make it worse. Room 12. The walk to the back of the motel felt like walking the Green Mile. The rain was relentless, soaking through Ethan's jacket, chilling him to the bone. Room 12 was the last door at the end of the walkway. The window was dark, covered by heavy blackout curtains. A "Do Not Disturb" sign hung on the knob. It wasn't the standard plastic sign. It was a handwritten note on a piece of notebook paper taped to the door. Please do not knock. I'm resting. Ethan stood in front of the door. His hand hovered over the wood. He was terrified. He had faced angry boards of directors. He had faced lawsuits. He had faced the prospect of bankruptcy. But he had never been this scared. He was afraid of what he would see. He was afraid she wouldn't recognise him. He was afraid she was already gone. He inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a stiff, rusty click. He pushed the door open. A wave of warmth hit him. The room was heated to a tropical temperature. The wall heater was rattling, working overtime. The smell hit him next. It wasn't the smell of decay he had feared, and it was the smell of rubbing alcohol, old paper, and something metallic. Blood. The room was small. Wood-panelled walls, a shag carpet from the 70s, a flickering television set to a static channel with the volume muted. In the corner, sitting in a worn armchair by the heater, was Sarah. She didn't look up when the door opened. She was wrapped in 3 blankets. She wore a thick wool hat. Her eyes were closed. Ethan stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. The silence in the room was heavy, punctuated only by the hiss-click of a machine. Ethan looked at the machine on the nightstand. It was a portable oxygen concentrator. A clear tube snaked from the machine, across the floor, and up to Sarah's face. The nasal cannula was taped to her cheeks, which were sunken and grey. She looked tiny. She had always been slender, but now she was skeletal. The blankets swallowed her. Her hands, resting on her lap, were translucent. He could see every tendon, every blue vein. And on the floor, next to her chair, was the cat carrier. Vance had mentioned. It wasn't a cat carrier. It was a plastic storage bin filled with medical supplies. Gauze, alcohol wipes, syringes, and rows of small glass vials. Ethan took a step forward. The floorboard creaked. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. They were dull, glazed with pain and medication. It took her a moment to focus. She looked at the door, then at Ethan. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't look surprised. She just looked tired. "You found me," she whispered. Her voice was barely a sound. It was air passing over damaged vocal cords. Ethan felt his knees give out. He sank to the floor, kneeling on the dirty carpet. "Sarah," he choked out. "You shouldn't be here," she said. She turned her head away, looking at the wall. "I paid for the room for another week. I have time." "I'm taking you home," Ethan said, crawling toward her. "I have the car outside. We can be at Seattle Grace in 3 hours. Dr. Evans is waiting. I called him." Sarah let out a soft, dry laugh that turned into a cough. She pressed a cloth to her mouth. When she pulled it away, Ethan saw the red stain. "Home?" she asked. "To the glass house, to watch you and her?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "She's gone. I kicked her out. It's just us. It's always been just us." "Liar," Sarah said. There was no venom in it, just a factual statement. "It was never just us. It was you, and your ambition, and your needs. I was just the fuel." "I made a mistake," Ethan wept. "I didn't know how sick you were. I swear, Sarah, if I had known—" "You knew," Sarah interrupted. She looked at him now, her gaze piercing through the fog of her illness. "I told you, in the kitchen. I begged you. You chose not to believe me because it was inconvenient, because my sickness didn't fit your narrative of the tragic hero saving the beautiful violinist." Ethan bowed his head. She was right. "I have the money now," Ethan said, pulling out his wallet, his phone, desperation making him babble. "I can sell the firm. I can sell the house. I can get the bone marrow. I'll buy it on the black market if I have to. Just let me save you." Sarah shook her head slowly. "You can't buy bone marrow, Ethan. You need a match." "I'll find a match. I'll test everyone in the state." "It's too late," Sarah said. She lifted her hand and pulled the blanket down slightly to reveal her arm. Ethan gasped. Her arm was a landscape of horror. It was covered in massive, spreading bruises, black, purple, yellow. Hematomas that rose under the skin like tumours. At the crook of her elbow, where she had been trying to inject herself with whatever medication she had left, the skin was necrotic. "My platelets are 0, Sarah said calmly. "My white count is 0. If you move me, I will bleed out internally. The vibration of the car, it would kill me before we reached the highway." Ethan stared at her arm. The reality crashed down on him. This wasn't a problem he could architect his way out of. This was biology. This was the end. "Why?" Ethan whispered. "Why did you come here? Why didn't you go to the hospital?" "Because the hospital would have called you," Sarah said. "And I didn't want you to come out of obligation. I didn't want you to sit by my bed and look at your watch, waiting for me to die so you could go back to her." "I wouldn't." "You would," she said. "You did. 5 years ago, when you were in the hospital, I sat by your bed for 4 months. I never left. I washed you. I fed you. And the moment you got better, you looked at me like I was a reminder of your weakness. You hated me for seeing you broken." She took a ragged breath. The oxygen machine hissed. I didn't want you to hate me when I died, Ethan. I wanted to disappear. I wanted you to remember me as useful, efficient, the invisible wife. No, Ethan sobbed, burying his face in her blanket. You are everything. You are the foundation. I am nothing without you. Look at me. I'm falling apart. Sarah looked down at the top of his head. Her hand twitched. She wanted to stroke his hair. It was a muscle memory. She had spent 10 years comforting him, but she didn't have the strength to lift her hand. You're not falling apart, she said softly. You're just inconvenienced. You'll find someone else to hold you up. You always do. I don't want someone else, Ethan shouted, looking up. I want you. I found the ledger, Sarah. I found the box. I know what you did. You gave me your kidney. You sold your mother's necklaces. You saved me. Sarah's expression shifted. A flicker of pain crossed her face. You opened the box, she whispered. I told you. Only when you were ready. I wasn't ready, Ethan admitted. I'm not ready, but I know, and I can't live with this. I can't live knowing I stole the life you saved. He grabbed her hand. It was cold, so cold. Please, he begged, let me try, even if it's 1% chance. Let me call an ambulance, a helicopter. Let me do something. Sarah looked at him. She saw the panic in his eyes. She saw the selfishness, yes, but also the genuine terror of a child left alone in the dark. She sighed. It was a wet, rattling sound. Ethan, she said, I'm tired. I'm so incredibly tired. Fighting this. Hiding this. It took everything. I came here to rest. I listened to the ocean. I watched the seagulls. It's peaceful. Please, don't turn my death into another one of your frantic projects. I can't let you die here, Ethan said. Not in a motel. Not like this. It's just a room, Ethan. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, Sarah's body seized. She pitched forward, coughing violently. Ethan jumped up. Sarah! She hacked and choked, her body convulsing. She couldn't catch her breath. The oxygen tube popped off her face. Blood sprayed from her mouth. Dark, clotted blood. It splattered onto the beige carpet. It splattered onto Ethan's white shirt. Help! Ethan screamed, turning to the door. Somebody help! No, Sarah gasped, grabbing his wrist with surprising strength. Her fingers dug into his skin. No doctors, no needles. She slumped back into the chair, gasping for air, blood trickling down her chin. Her eyes rolled back for a second, then focused on him again. Stay, she whispered. Just stay. Ethan stood frozen. He looked at the blood on his shirt. He looked at his wife, who was drowning in her own body. He realised then that he couldn't fix this. He couldn't write a check. He couldn't redesign the structure. He had to do the one thing he had never done for her. He had to be present. He slowly knelt back down. He picked up the oxygen tube and gently taped it back to her face. He grabbed a tissue and wiped the blood from her chin. I'm here, he said, his voice trembling. I'm right here. Sarah closed her eyes. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Tell me, she whispered. Tell me about the house. The house? Ethan asked, confused. The one you were designing, she said dreamily. The one for us. Not the glass one. The other one, the cottage. Ethan choked back a sob. He had never designed a cottage. He had never designed anything for them. It was always for the portfolio, for the magazines. But he couldn't tell her that. Not now. Yes, Ethan lied. He closed his eyes and summoned the architect in his mind. The cottage, it's on a hill, but not a steep one, a gentle slope, facing south for the warmth. Wood? Sarah asked. Cedar, Ethan said. Warm cedar. Unfinished, so it smells like the forest. And a big porch. Wraparound. For the rocking chairs, Sarah murmured. Yes. 2 rocking chairs. And a garden. A real garden. No gravel, just soil. And orchids. Hundreds of orchids. They grow wild there. You don't have to water them. The rain takes care of them. Sarah smiled. A genuine, small smile. It sounds safe, she whispered. It is, Ethan said, tears streaming down his face. It's the safest place in the world, and there are no blueprints, no deadlines, no computers, just us. Sarah's hand relaxed in his grip, her breathing hitched, then slowed. Ethan? Yeah? Did you like the violin? The question was a knife in his heart. Even at the end, she was asking about his betrayal, asking for validation of his choices. No, Ethan whispered intensely. I hated it. It was loud. It was screeching. I missed the silence. I missed your typing. I missed the sound of you. Sarah let out a long breath. Good, she breathed. I always thought it was too showy. She drifted into a doze. The exhaustion pulled her under. Ethan sat there on the floor of room 12, holding his dying wife's hand, listening to the heater rattle and the storm rage outside. He looked at his watch. It was midnight. The new day had begun. But for Sarah, the sun was setting fast, and for Ethan, the long night was just beginning. The architecture of a second time in the motel room did not move in minutes or hours. It moved in breaths. Ethan sat on the floor, his back pressed against the wood-panelled wall, his legs cramped and numb. He was counting. Inhale. Hiss. Exhale. Silence. Inhale. Hiss. Exhale. Silence. He was listening to the rhythm of Sarah's existence. It was a terrifying, irregular percussion. Sometimes the silence between the exhale and the next inhale lasted too long. 4 seconds. 5 seconds. And Ethan's own heart would stop, suspended in a panic, until the machine clicked and forced a new breath into her lungs. It was 3:00 a.m. The storm outside had settled into a monotonous, heavy downpour that drummed against the metal roof of the motel. Inside, the room was a capsule of heat and the smell of sickness. Ethan had taken off his jacket. His white dress shirt was stained with dried blood, a Rorschach test of his guilt right over his heart. He looked at the room. As an architect, he had spent his life trying to control space. He built structures to dictate how people moved, how they felt, how they saw the light. He believed that if you designed the perfect room, you could create the perfect life. But here, in this cheap 12 by 12 box, with its peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling, he was powerless. The architecture of death was indifferent to his genius. It was stripping away the walls, the floor, the ceiling, leaving them floating in a void of pure, raw, biological reality. Sarah stirred in the armchair. She had refused to move to the bed. She said if she lay down flat, she felt like she was drowning. So she sat up, wrapped in the cheap motel blankets, her head lolling to the side. "Water," she rasped. The word was barely a vibration. Ethan scrambled up. His legs pricked with needles of returning circulation. He grabbed the plastic cup from the bathroom sink. He filled it with tap water. It was lukewarm. He knelt beside her. Here, slowly. He held the cup to her cracked lips. She took a sip. Her throat clicked as she swallowed. It was a difficult mechanical sound. She pulled away, coughing weakly. A droplet of water ran down her chin. Ethan wiped it away with his thumb. Her skin felt like paper, dry, thin, fragile. Is it morning?" she asked, her eyes not quite focusing on him. "Not yet," Ethan whispered. "It's still night. Try to sleep." "I can't sleep," she murmured. "I have to finish the file." Ethan's chest tightened. "What file, Sarah?" "The Z-curve," she said, her voice gaining a sudden frantic clarity. "The wind load simulation. I didn't finish the export. The password. You need the password." Ethan closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, hot and stinging. Even here, at the edge of oblivion, her mind was still trapped in the cage of his ambition. She was still trying to be his employee. "It doesn't matter," Ethan said, gripping her hand. "The building doesn't matter, Sarah. Let it fall. Let it all fall down." "No," she insisted, her fingers twitching in his grip. "You worked so hard. You need the win. You need the applause." "I don't want the applause," Ethan sobbed quietly. "I want you." "The password," she continued, ignoring him, lost in the loop of her anxiety. It's the date." "What date?" Ethan asked, humouring her, just wanting to calm her down. "The date we met," she whispered. "At the coffee shop, under the yellow umbrella." Ethan froze. He searched his memory. He remembered the coffee shop. He remembered the rain. He remembered seeing her, a quiet girl with intense eyes reading a book on structural engineering. But the date? Was it October? November? 2015? 2016? He realised with a sick, hollow thud in his stomach that he didn't know. He couldn't remember the specific day. It was just a detail, a blurred line in the blueprint of his past. I remember the umbrella," Ethan stammered. It was bright yellow. Sarah looked at him. For a second, the fog in her eyes cleared. She saw his hesitation. She saw the blank space in his mind, where that memory should have been. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It was a smile of resignation. "November 12th, she whispered. 11:12. 11 and 12, Ethan repeated, burning it into his brain. "Okay, I got it. November 12th. You forgot. she stated simply. Not an accusation, just a fact. I'm sorry, Ethan wept. I'm so sorry. I forgot everything that mattered. I filled my head with dimensions and budgets and accolades, and I pushed out the dates, I pushed out the memories. It's okay, she said, her voice fading again. I remembered for both of us. That was my job, to be the memory card. She closed her eyes again. Her breathing hitched. Ethan stared at her. To be the memory card. That's what she had reduced herself to. An external hard drive for his life, storing his trauma, his debts, his appointments, and his love, so he could run faster, lighter, unburdened. He squeezed her hand. You're not a memory card. You're my wife. You're Sarah. She didn't answer. She was drifting again, pulled by the tide of the morphine and the hypoxia. The phantom limb. An hour passed. The silence grew heavier. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen was blindingly bright in the dark room. Message from Vance. Storm is getting worse. Highway patrol might close the 101. If you're coming back, leave now, or you're stuck there. Ethan looked at the message. Then he looked at Sarah. He turned the phone off. He threw it onto the empty bed. He wasn't going back. Not without her. He looked at his own side, the right side of his abdomen. He lifted his shirt. A long, pale scar ran across his flank. The scar from the transplant 5 years ago. He looked at Sarah's stomach, hidden beneath the blankets. He knew she had a matching scar. He reached out and gently placed his hand over the blankets, right where her kidney used to be. I can feel it, he whispered to her sleeping form. It hurts tonight, Sarah. It knows you're here. It wants to go back to you. Sarah didn't move, but her breathing changed. It became faster, shallower. Cheney Stokes' respiration. The pattern of the end. Ethan felt a cold panic rising in his throat. He had read about this. He knew the signs. No, he pleaded. Not yet. Please, not yet. I haven't fixed it. I haven't made it up to you. He needed more time. He needed a montage, a movie montage where he nursed her back to health, where he carried her to the car, drove her to the best hospital, where the music swelled and the doctors performed a miracle. He needed the Act 3 redemption arc, but life is not a screenplay. Biology does not care about character arcs. Sarah's eyes opened wide. Suddenly. Shockingly. She stared at the ceiling. Her pupils were blown wide, black holes absorbing the dim light. She wasn't looking at the water stain anymore. She was looking at something beyond the room. Sarah? Ethan leaned in, his face inches from hers. Sarah, look at me. She didn't blink. Her chest heaved. She was fighting for air, gasping like a fish pulled onto the shore. Ethan, she gasped. Her voice was different now, urgent, terrified. I'm here. Ethan grabbed her shoulders. I'm right here. I'm scared, she whispered. It broke him. The admission. Sarah, the stoic, the strong, the one who handled bankruptcy and cancer and betrayal without flinching, was scared. It's okay to be scared, Ethan cried, stroking her face. I've got you. You're not alone. I'm holding you. I'm not letting go. The cold, she chattered. It's so cold. Ethan stripped off his shirt. He didn't care about the blood. He didn't care about the cold room. He climbed onto the chair with her, wrapping his arms around her frail body, pressing his warm skin against hers. He tried to transfer his heat, his life force, into her. "I'm warming you," he murmured into her hair. "I'm right here. Is that better?" She relaxed slightly against him. Her head fell onto his bare shoulder. "Yes," she breathed. "Better." She lay there for a moment, listening to his heartbeat. The heart she had protected, the heart she had broken herself to keep beating. "Ethan," she said. Her voice was so faint he had to press his ear to her lips. "Yes, baby." Don't build the cottage." Ethan pulled back slightly to look at her face. "What? Why?" "Because," she whispered, a tear sliding down her temple. "You hate gardening. You hate mud." Ethan let out a choked laugh. I'll learn to love the mud." "No," she said. "Build a lighthouse." "A lighthouse?" "Yes. Tall, strong, light, for the ships lost in the storm." She took a deep, shuddering breath. Her eyes drifted to his. "You are the builder," she whispered. "Build something honest." "I will," Ethan promised. "I'll build it for you. The Sarah Caldwell Lighthouse." She smiled. It was a true smile this time. A smile of release. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." She exhaled. It was a long, slow exhale. A sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 5 years of silence, 5 years of secrets, 5 years of pain. Ethan waited for the inhale. He waited. The oxygen machine hissed. Click. He waited. The rain hammered the roof. He waited. "Sarah." Silence. "Sarah, breathe." Silence. "Sarah." He shook her gently. Her head rolled loosely on his shoulder. Her eyes were still half open, staring at nothing. The chest against his chest was still. "No," Ethan whispered. "No, no, no." He put his hand on her neck. No pulse. He put his ear to her mouth. No breath. The machine hissed again. A mechanical mockery of life. Ethan pulled back. He stared at her body, and it looked exactly the same as it had 10 seconds ago, yet it was completely different. The spark was gone. The person who remembered the umbrella, the person who fixed the Z-curve, the person who loved him despite everything, was gone. A primal roar built up in Ethan's chest. It started as a moan and erupted into a scream that tore his throat apart. "Sarah!" He buried his face in her neck, screaming into her dead skin. He rocked her back and forth, wailing like a wounded animal. He didn't pray. He didn't bargain. He knew it was final. The architect had hit the unyielding limit of reality. He sat there, half naked, holding his dead wife in a cheap motel chair, while the oxygen machine continued to pump air into a room that was suddenly, violently empty. The morning of the survivor. The sun did not rise. The grey just became lighter. It was 7:00 a.m. Ethan hadn't moved. He was still holding her. Her body had grown cold and stiff in his arms. The rigor mortis was setting in. He felt numb. The screaming had stopped hours ago. Now, there was just a vast, white silence inside his head. There was a knock on the door. Sharp. 3 raps. Housekeeping? You in there? It wasn't housekeeping. It was Mrs. Gable. Ethan didn't answer. The key turned in the lock. The door opened. Mrs. Gable stood there, holding a bucket of cleaning supplies. She took one look at the scene. The man on the chair, shirtless, holding the woman wrapped in blankets, the oxygen machine still humming. She didn't scream. She set the bucket down. She walked over to the machine and flipped the switch. The hissing stopped. The silence became absolute. Mrs. Gable looked at Ethan. Her hard face softened with a grim pity. "She gone?" she asked quietly. Ethan nodded. He couldn't speak. His throat was raw. "When?" "Last night," Ethan croaked. "Around 3. And you've been sitting there ever since?" Ethan nodded again. Mrs. Gable sighed. She walked over to the bed and pulled the top sheet off. She walked over to Ethan. "You gotta let her go now, son," she said gently. "I can't," Ethan whispered. "If I let go, she's really gone." "She's already gone," Mrs. Gable said. "She's at peace. No more pain. No more coughing. Let her go." She put a hand on Ethan's shoulder. It was a firm, grounding touch. Ethan slowly, agonizingly, loosened his grip. He let Mrs. Gable help him lower Sarah's body onto the floor, onto the sheet. He looked at her one last time. She looked small, so incredibly small. Mrs. Gable covered her face with the sheet. "I'll call the coroner," Mrs. Gable said. You get cleaned up. Put a shirt on. You can't meet the police like this." Ethan stood up. His legs nearly buckled. He walked to the bathroom. He looked in the mirror. The man staring back was not Ethan Caldwell, the master architect. He was a ruin. His eyes were hollowed out. His face was streaked with dried tears and someone else's blood. His chest was smeared with the fluids of death. He turned on the faucet. He splashed cold water on his face. He saw the bottle of painkillers on the edge of the sink, Sarah's pills. He picked up the bottle. He shook it. It was empty. She had taken them all? No, she had just run out. She had run out of everything. He walked back out into the room. Mrs. Gable was on the phone in the corner. Ethan walked to the window and pulled back the blackout curtain. The rain had stopped. The marsh outside was covered in mist. In the distance, the grey ocean churned against the shore. And there, standing on a rotting wooden post in the middle of the marsh, was a great blue heron. It stood perfectly still, like a statue, watching the motel. Ethan stared at the bird. It was solitary, silent, dignified. "A lighthouse," he whispered to the glass. He turned back to the shrouded figure on the floor. He walked over to his discarded jacket. He pulled out his wallet. He pulled out the blue velvet box. He placed the box on the table next to her body. "I'm sorry," he said to the white sheet. "I'm so sorry I didn't build you the cottage." He heard the sirens in the distance. The world was coming to intrude on his grief. Forms to fill out, questions to answer, transport to arrange. But for one last moment, he stood guard over her. He realised then that he had spent 5 years trying to build a legacy that would make him immortal, But the only thing that had ever made him real was the woman lying on the floor, and he had dismantled her, brick by brick, to build his glass castle. The sirens grew louder. Ethan buttoned his blood-stained shirt. He didn't try to hide the stain. He wanted everyone to see it. He wanted to wear it like a badge of his crime. He opened the door to let them in. The aftermath. The return. 2 days later. Seattle. Ethan drove the Porsche back up the winding driveway to the glass house. It was raining again. The car felt different now. It felt like a hearse. In the passenger seat sat a small ceramic urn. It was plain, unadorned, just grey clay. He hadn't chosen the marble one. He hadn't chosen the gold one. He chose the one that felt like the earth. He parked the car. He picked up the urn. He walked to the front door. He unlocked it. He stepped inside. The house was blazing with light. Music was playing. Vivaldi. Loud. Triumphant. Ethan stopped in the hallway. Maya came dancing out of the kitchen. She was wearing a white silk dress. She held a glass of champagne. "Ethan," she cried, beaming. "You're back. I was so worried. You disappeared for 3 days. Your phone was off." She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. She smelled of expensive perfume and life. "Guess what?" she squealed, pulling back. "The Elysium contract. Mr. Sterling called. The funds cleared. We did it, Ethan. We're rich. We're going to be famous." She spun around, laughing. "And look, I redecorated the lounge. I bought that white sofa you liked." Ethan stood there, dripping wet, holding the grey urn. He looked at Maya. He looked at her joy. He looked at her beating heart. He looked at the house. It was beautiful. It was perfect. It was a tomb. "Maya," Ethan said. His voice was dead. Flat. "What?" Maya stopped dancing. She looked at his face. Then she looked at the urn in his hands. Her smile faltered. "What is that?" Ethan walked past her. He walked into the living room. He placed the urn on the centre of the coffee table, right on top of the Architectural Digest magazine. "That," Ethan said, turning to face her, "is my wife." Maya froze. The glass of champagne slipped from her fingers. It hit the floor and shattered. Crash. The sound echoed through the glass house. "She's dead," Maya whispered, horrified. "Yes," Ethan said. "She died in a motel room, alone, while you were buying cigars." He looked around the room. "Get out," he said. "Ethan, Get out!" Ethan roared. The sound was so loud, it seemed to vibrate the glass walls. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Take your heart and get out." Maya scrambled back, terrified. She didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and ran. She ran out the front door into the rain, leaving the door wide open. Ethan didn't close it. He stood in the centre of his perfect living room. The wind blew in, scattering the papers. The rain blew in, soaking the expensive rug. Ethan looked at the urn. He fell to his knees. He didn't cry. He had no tears left. He just sat there, watching the storm invade his sanctuary, waiting for the glass house to finally, inevitably, shatter. The deconstruction of ego. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky of bruised purple and a silence so profound it felt heavy. The glass house, once a beacon of modern perfection, now looked like a shipwreck on the cliffside. The front door was still wide open from the night before, allowing the damp morning air to settle into the bones of the building. Ethan sat on the white sofa in the living room. He was staring at the coffee table. In the centre of the table sat the grey ceramic urn. It was unpolished, rough to the touch, a stark contrast to the sleek chrome and glass surrounding it. It was the only real thing in the room. Ethan hadn't moved for 6 hours. He was watching the light change, watching the shadows lengthen and shorten across the floor. He felt a strange calmness. It wasn't peace. It was the numbness of a man who has been hollowed out. He stood up. His joints popped. He walked to the open door and closed it. The click of the latch sounded like a prison cell locking, but this time he was locking himself in with the truth. He looked at the mess on the floor, the shattered champagne glass, the puddle of sticky, dried alcohol. The footprints Maya had left, muddy, chaotic tracks that marred the pristine white rug. He didn't call the cleaning service. He walked to the kitchen, found a bucket and a rag, and filled it with hot, soapy water. He got down on his hands and knees. He scrubbed. He scrubbed until his knuckles were raw. He scrubbed away the mud, the champagne, the memory of the celebration that should never have happened. He worked with a meticulous, rhythmic intensity, treating the rug as if it were a holy shroud that had been desecrated. When the floor was clean, he stood up and looked at the rest of the house. It was too full. It was full of things that didn't matter. It was full of statements. The Corbusier chair, the abstract sculptures, the awards on the shelves. He walked over to the shelf displaying his Architect of the Year trophy, a jagged shard of crystal. He picked it up. It felt light, cheap. He walked to the trash can and dropped it in. Thud. He went to the closet. He pulled out his expensive Italian suits, the armour he wore to intimidate clients and charm investors. He pulled them off the hangers in armfuls. He threw them into garbage bags. He went to Maya's guest room. He didn't look around. He just stripped the bed, gathered the clothes she had left behind, the violin sheet music, the toiletries. He shoved them into bags. He didn't want to burn them. That would be too dramatic. He just wanted them gone. He wanted to erase the interference. Then he went to the master bedroom. He stood at the door, afraid to enter. This was Sarah's space. Even though he slept here, it was her domain. The scent of her, vanilla and old books, still lingered faintly, fading with every hour. He walked to her side of the bed. On the nightstand, there was a stack of books. The History of Brutalism, Japanese Garden Design, Managing Chronic Pain. He touched the spine of the pain management book. He hadn't known she was reading it. He hadn't known she was in pain. He opened her closet. Her clothes were modest, mostly grey and navy, high necks to hide the bruises, long sleeves to hide the needle marks. He buried his face in her cardigan. He breathed in deep, trying to catch the last molecules of her existence. "I'm sorry," he whispered into the wall. "I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it all." He didn't pack her clothes. He left them hanging. He couldn't bear to see the empty hangers yet. He went back downstairs to the urn. He picked it up gently, cradling it in the crook of his arm like an infant. "We have to go to work, Sarah," he said softly. "One last meeting." He walked out to the Porsche. He placed the urn on the passenger seat and buckled the seatbelt around it. It was an absurd image, but he didn't care. He started the engine. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't check his reflection in the rearview mirror. He just drove. The suicide of a career. The offices of Caldwell and Associates were vibrating with energy. The news of the cleared funds from the Elysium investors had spread. The interns were popping corks on cheap sparkling wine. The phones were ringing off the hook. Ethan walked in. The room went silent. He looked terrifying. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, clothes the staff had never seen him in. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His eyes were sunken, dark pits of exhaustion, and he was carrying a grey ceramic urn. "Boss!" Jason, the head intern, stepped forward, his smile faltering. We were just celebrating. The money is in. We can start hiring the contractors." Ethan walked past him without a word. He walked straight to the centre of the open plan office. He placed the urn on his desk. "Turn off the music," Ethan said. His voice was low, but it cut through the room like a blade. Someone scrambled to hit the mute button. The office fell into a stunned silence. "Listen to me," Ethan said, looking around at the young, ambitious faces. He saw himself in them, the hunger, the blindness. "The Elysium project is cancelled." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "Cancelled?" Jason stammered. But the money, the contracts, we signed them." "We lied," Ethan said. He walked to the large whiteboard where the timeline for Elysium was drawn in colourful markers. He picked up an eraser. "The structural data was falsified," Ethan announced, erasing the timeline with broad, angry strokes. "The Z-curve calculations were never verified. The wind load simulations were faked. By me." He didn't mention Sarah's role in fixing things. He took the blame. It was his burden now. "The building is a death trap," Ethan continued, scrubbing the board until it was white. "If we build it, it will fall, and people will die." "But we can fix it," Jason argued, looking panicked. "We can hire a new engineer. We have the capital now." "No," Ethan said. He threw the eraser across the room. "The foundation is rotten. You can't build on a lie." He turned to his computer. He logged in. He projected his screen onto the main wall monitor so everyone could see. He opened the bank account portal. Balance, $42,150,000. "This money," Ethan said, pointing to the screen, "it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to a vision that doesn't exist." He navigated to the transfer page. He typed in the account number for the investor refund holding. "Boss, don't!" Jason screamed. "That's career suicide. You'll be blacklisted. They'll sue you for breach of contract." "Let them sue," Ethan said. "I have nothing left to lose." He hit confirm. Transaction pending. Funds returned. The room erupted. Phones started ringing immediately, angry investors getting the notifications. The interns were shouting, some were crying, realising their big break just evaporated. Ethan stood in the eye of the hurricane, perfectly calm. He picked up the urn. "You're all fired," he said gently. "Go home. Find a better mentor. Don't be like me." He walked out of the office. Jason ran after him, grabbing his arm at the elevator. "Why?" Jason demanded, tears of frustration in his eyes. "Why did you do that? You were the best. You were a god in this city." Ethan looked at the boy. He touched the cool surface of the urn. I wasn't a god, Jason, Ethan said. I was a parasite. And the host, she's gone. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped inside. As the doors closed, he saw his empire crumbling in the reflection of the polished steel. He felt lighter than he had in years. The autopsy of a marriage. Ethan's next stop was Seattle Grace Hospital. He didn't go to the emergency room. He went to the administrative wing. He sat in Dr. Evans's office. The doctor sat behind his desk, looking at Ethan with a mixture of anger and professional restraint. You have some nerve coming here, Dr. Evans said, adjusting his glasses. After she died, alone in a motel. I was there, Ethan said quietly. At the end, I was there. Dr. Evans paused. The anger in his eyes softened slightly, replaced by a weary sadness. I'm glad. She didn't deserve to be alone. I need to know, Ethan said, leaning forward. I need the records. Not just the anemia, the transplant. 5 years ago. Mr. Caldwell, those are confidential medical records. She's dead! Ethan slammed his hand on the desk. She's dead because of me. I need to know what she did. I need to know what I'm carrying inside me. Dr. Evans sighed. He opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder. He hesitated, then slid it across the desk. She wanted you to have this eventually, Dr. Evans said. She made me promise to give it to you if the worst happened. Ethan opened the folder. It wasn't just charts. It was a letter, a consent form signed in Sarah's neat handwriting. Donor, Sarah Caldwell. Recipient, Ethan Caldwell. Procedure, living kidney donation. Risk assessment, high. Donor has history of autoimmune markers. Procedure may trigger latent bone marrow suppression. Ethan read the words. Risk assessment, high. She knew? Ethan whispered. We warned her, Dr. Evans said solemnly. We told her that given her family history and her delicate immune system, the trauma of the surgery could trigger a cascade effect. We told her it could shorten her life significantly. And she did it anyway, Ethan said, tears blurring his vision. She said you had work to do, Dr. Evans recalled. She said you were an artist and the world needed your buildings. She said she was expendable. Expendable, Ethan repeated. The word tasted like ash. She traded her life for yours, Ethan, Dr. Evans said brutally. Not figuratively, literally. She gave you 5 years. 5 years that cost her 30. Ethan closed the folder. He felt the phantom pain in his side again. It wasn't pain. It was the weight of the debt. What do I do with that? Ethan asked, looking up at the doctor. How do I live with that? You don't live with it, Dr. Evans said. You live for it. That kidney inside you, it's her. Don't waste it. Don't use it to drink whiskey and build glass cages. Use it for something she would be proud of. Ethan stood up. He took the folder. Thank you, Doctor. One more thing, Dr. Evans said. She left something else. A contact. He wrote a name and an address on a sticky note. Father Thomas, St. Jude's Hospice. She volunteered there, Dr. Evans said, before she got too sick, every Tuesday. She designed their garden. She never told you? Ethan shook his head. No, she never told me. Go see it, Dr. Evans said. Go see who your wife really was. The Garden of Hidden Things St. Jude's Hospice was a small, unassuming brick building on the outskirts of the city. It was a place for the terminally ill, for those with nowhere else to go. Ethan walked through the gates. He expected it to be depressing. Instead, he walked into an explosion of colour. The back of the hospice opened up into a sprawling, chaotic, beautiful garden. It wasn't the manicured, geometric landscape Ethan would have designed. It was wild. There were winding paths made of crushed seashells. There were raised beds filled with herbs that smelled of lavender and rosemary. There were wind chimes hanging from every branch, filling the air with a gentle, tinkling music. And there were benches. Dozens of benches, each one different, placed in alcoves of privacy. Ethan walked down the path. He saw a small brass plaque on a wooden pergola covered in wisteria, designed and planted by Sarah C. For those who need a place to rest. Ethan touched the plaque. He traced her name. Can I help you? A priest in a worn cardigan walked up to him. He had kind eyes and dirt under his fingernails. Father Thomas. I'm Ethan, he said. Sarah's husband. Father Thomas smiled, warmly. Ah, the architect. She spoke of you often. She did? Ethan was surprised. What did she say? She said you were brilliant, Father Thomas said. She said you were trying to touch the sky. She admired that. She didn't tell you I was a monster, Ethan asked bitterly. Sarah didn't speak ill of people, Father Thomas said. She only worried. She worried that you were so busy building the walls that you forgot to put in the doors. Father Thomas gestured to the garden. She made this, you know, with her own hands, even when she was sick. She said she wanted to create a place where people could look at something beautiful while they said goodbye. Ethan looked around. He saw an old woman sitting on a bench, holding the hand of a young man. They were crying, but they looked peaceful. He saw a child chasing a butterfly. This was architecture. This was design with a purpose. It wasn't about ego. It was about comfort. She was a better architect than I ever was, Ethan whispered. She had a gift, Father Thomas agreed. She understood that a building isn't just bricks. It's a container for the soul. Father Thomas reached into his pocket. She left something here too. A few weeks ago, she said if you ever came, and she was sure you would, to give it to you. He handed Ethan a small silver USB drive. Ethan recognised it. It wasn't the one from the velvet box. It was a different one. Thank you, Ethan said. He found a bench, Sarah's bench, and sat down. He pulled out his laptop from his bag. He plugged in the drive. There was only one folder, the lighthouse. Ethan clicked it. It opened a video file. The screen flickered to life. It was a recording. Sarah was sitting in the kitchen of the glass house. It must have been recorded months ago. She looked healthier, but her eyes were sad. Hi, Ethan, the video Sarah said. Her voice was clear, devoid of the rasp of the end. Ethan felt his heart stop. It was like she was sitting next to him. If you're watching this, she continued, playing with her wedding ring, it means I'm gone. And it probably means you found out about the kidney, and the money, and everything else. And knowing you, you're probably beating yourself up. You're probably tearing down the world. Ethan nodded at the screen, tears streaming down his face. I am. Don't, Sarah said sternly. Don't destroy. Build. That's what you do. You build. She leaned closer to the camera. Do you remember the lighthouse story? The one my dad used to tell? About the keeper who kept the light burning even when he was freezing? You are the keeper, Ethan. You have so much talent, but you've been building towers to look down on people. I want you to build something to bring them home. On the screen, she held up a sketchbook. I sketched this. It's silly. I'm not the artist, but it's an idea for the land in Aberdeen, the marshland. It's cheap. Nobody wants it. But the light there, it's beautiful. She flipped the page. It was a drawing of a structure. It wasn't a lighthouse in the traditional sense. It was a community centre, a sanctuary. It was built of wood and glass, shaped like a lantern, glowing from within. It hovered over the marsh on stilts, minimising the impact on the land. Project: the Sarah House. A retreat for families of organ donors and recipients. Build this, Sarah said. Use the money. If there is any money left, build a place where people who give everything and people who receive everything can heal, together. She smiled one last time. I love you, Ethan. I loved you when you were broken. I loved you when you were shiny. Now, go be real. The video ended. Ethan sat in the garden, staring at the black screen. The Sarah House. It was perfect. It was necessary. And it was impossible. He had just given away all the money. He had returned the 40 million. He was broke. He had no firm. He had no team. He looked at the urn next to him on the bench. You always give me the hard assignments, he said to her. But then he looked at the sketch on the screen again, the structure on stilts, the lantern shape. He closed his eyes and visualised it. He saw the beams. He saw the joints. He saw the way the rain would run off the roof. He saw the way the light would filter in through the cedar slats. He felt a spark. Not the frantic, ego-driven adrenaline of Elysium, but a slow, warm burn in his chest. A creative fire fueled by love, not ambition. He closed the laptop. He stood up. He picked up the urn. Okay, he said. Aberdeen. We're going to Aberdeen. He walked out of the garden. He didn't walk like a defeated man anymore. He walked like a man with a blueprint. The return to the marsh. The drive to Aberdeen was different this time. He wasn't racing the storm. He was driving into it. He arrived at the Sea Mist Motor Inn. It was closed. Mrs. Gable had put up a for sale sign. Ethan parked the Porsche. He walked past the motel, down the muddy path to the edge of the marsh. The land was desolate. Grey water, tall grass, rotting logs, the smell of salt and decay. But Ethan looked at it with his architect's eyes. He saw the foundation. He saw the sight lines. He saw where the sun would rise and hit the water. He took a deep breath. The air was clean, cold, honest. He walked out onto the wooden pier where he had seen the heron. He opened the urn. The ash was grey and fine. It swirled in the wind. I'm not saying goodbye, Ethan said to the wind. I'm planting you. He poured the ashes into the marsh water. They swirled, clouding the grey water for a moment, then dissolving, becoming part of the tide. This is the site, Sarah, he promised. I'm going to build it right here, on top of the mud. It will be the most beautiful thing I ever made. He turned back to the car. He had no money. He had a reputation as a fraud. He was alone. But he had his hands. He had her kidney. And he had a design. He pulled out his phone. He dialed the number on the for sale sign in the motel window. "Mrs. Gable," Ethan said. "It's Ethan Caldwell. Don't hang up." "What do you want?" Mrs. Gable's voice was suspicious. "I want to buy your land," Ethan said. "The motel, the marsh, everything." "With what money?" Mrs. Gable scoffed. "I heard you blew up your company." "I have a car," Ethan said, looking at the silver Porsche. "It's worth $200,000. I'll trade you. The car for the land. Straight swap." Silence on the line. "You're crazy," Mrs. Gable said. "Probably," Ethan admitted. "But I need to build something, and I need to start now." "Bring the keys," Mrs. Gable said. "I've always wanted a Porsche." Ethan smiled, a real smile. It cracked his dry lips. "I'm on my way." He hung up. He looked at the marsh one last time. The heron was back, watching him from the reeds. Ethan nodded to the bird. "Let's get to work." The mud and the marrow. Aberdeen was not a place for architects. It was a place for labourers. The wind didn't caress the buildings here. It assaulted them. The rain didn't wash the surfaces. It tried to erode them back into the sea. Ethan Caldwell, the man who had worn $3,000 suits and designed climate-controlled atriums, was now knee-deep in grey mud. He wore a pair of stained canvas overalls and a thick flannel shirt that smelled of sawdust and sweat. His hands, once smooth and manicured for holding delicate drafting pens, were now rough, covered in blisters and calluses. His beard had grown out, thick and dark, hiding the sharp jawline that had graced magazine covers. He swung a sledgehammer. Wham! The wall of the old Sea Mist Motor Inn office crumbled. Dust exploded into the damp air. Wham! Another chunk of rot and drywall fell. Ethan was demolishing the motel by hand. He couldn't afford a bulldozer. He couldn't afford a crew. He had traded the Porsche for the deed, and he had exactly $4,000 left in his personal checking account, money he needed for lumber, concrete, and nails. He breathed in. The air tasted of salt and mould. He breathed out. The scar on his side, Sarah's kidney, ached with a dull, throbbing rhythm. It was a constant reminder. I am here. We are here. You're swinging it wrong, a voice rasped. Ethan stopped, wiping sweat from his forehead with his forearm. Mrs. Gable was standing on the porch of the trailer she had moved into while Ethan tore down her old livelihood. She was smoking a cigarette, watching him with critical amusement. "It's a hammer," Ethan panted. "There's only one way to swing it." "You're using your back," Mrs. Gable said, blowing smoke into the wind. "You gotta use your legs. Keep going like that. You'll slip a disc before lunch, and I ain't dragging you to the clinic." Ethan leaned on the hammer handle. "Thanks for the tip." "Don't thank me. Just don't die on my property. It lowers the property value." "Oh, wait, I don't own it anymore." "You do." She chuckled, a dry sound like dead leaves scraping together. She pointed to the pile of debris. "You keeping the copper pipe?" "Yes," Ethan said. "I can sell it for scrap. Buy more cement." "Smart," Mrs. Gable nodded. Maybe you aren't as useless as you look. Ethan turned back to the wall. He adjusted his stance. He engaged his legs. He swung. Crack! The wall gave way. Sunlight poured through the hole, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, Ethan closed his eyes. In the dust, he could almost see Sarah standing there, nodding approval. Efficient, she would say. Resourceful. He wasn't building the glass tower anymore. He was tearing down the past to build a foundation for the dead. The ghost in the frame. 3 months passed. The motel was gone. The ground was cleared. Now, the skeleton of the Sarah house began to rise from the mud. It was a difficult birth. The marshland was unstable. Ethan had to drive deep pylons into the bedrock to support the structure. He worked 12 hours a day, sometimes 14. He slept in a small tent pitched on the drier ground near the road, and he ate canned beans and instant coffee made on a camp stove. He lost 20 pounds. He looked gaunt, haunted, but his eyes burned with a terrifying intensity. He was working on the subfloor framing when the pain hit him. It wasn't the usual ache. It was a sharp, tearing sensation in his abdomen. He dropped the drill. He doubled over, gasping, clutching his side. The world spun. The grey sky and the brown mud merged into a swirling vortex. He fell onto the plywood deck. The rough wood scraped his cheek. Is this it? He thought. Is the kidney failing? Did I push it too hard? He lay there, staring at the clouds racing overhead. He thought about Sarah. He thought about how she must have felt in those final days. The weakness, the betrayal of the body. Get up, he whispered to himself. You don't get to quit. She didn't quit. He tried to push himself up, but his arms trembled and gave way. He heard tyres crunching on gravel. A vehicle door slammed, footsteps running. Ethan! It wasn't Mrs. Gable. It was a younger voice, male. Ethan squinted. A figure loomed over him. Boss? Jesus, look at you! It was Jason, the intern. Jason was wearing a pristine North Face jacket and clean hiking boots. He looked horrified. He knelt down, checking Ethan's pulse. I'm okay, Ethan wheezed, swatting Jason's hand away. Just dizzy. Low blood sugar. Low blood sugar? Jason looked around at the empty cans of beans and the muddy tent. You look like a castaway, Ethan. You look like you're dying. I'm building, Ethan corrected, forcing himself to sit up. The world tilted, then righted itself. What are you doing here, Jason? I fired you. I know, Jason said. He sat back on his heels. I went to work for Harding and Associates, the big firm downtown. Good, Ethan said, reaching for his water bottle. They're safe. Boring, but safe. It's awful, Jason said. They don't care about the line. They don't care about the light. They just care about the square footage. I spent 3 months designing parking garages. Jason looked at the frame of the Sarah house rising out of the mist. It was simple, geometric, elegant. Even in its skeletal state, it had a spirit. It looked like a lantern waiting to be lit. I heard rumours, Jason said quietly. People in the city, they say you went crazy. They say you're building a shrine in a swamp. Let them talk, Ethan grunted. He tried to stand. Jason grabbed his arm and hoisted him up. I came to see if it was true, Jason said. and to give you this." Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Ethan. Ethan opened it. It was a check. 5,000. "What is this?" Ethan asked. "It's my severance pay from your firm," Jason said. "And the other interns. We pooled it. You never paid us for the last month because you emptied the accounts." "I can't take this." Ethan tried to hand it back. "I owe you money. I can't take more." "It's not a loan," Jason said. "It's an investment." Jason walked over to the pile of cedar planks. He ran his hand over the wood. "This is red cedar, right? For the siding?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Local. Rot resistant." "It's going to turn silver in the salt air," Jason noted. "It's going to look beautiful." He turned back to Ethan. He took off his expensive jacket and tossed it onto a stack of plywood. He rolled up his sleeves. "I brought my tools," Jason said. "They're in the truck." "Jason, go home," Ethan warned. "There's no money here, no glory, just mud." "I'm not here for glory," Jason said, picking up the drill Ethan had dropped. "I'm here because you're the only architect I know who actually destroyed his own life to tell the truth. That's rare, Ethan. That's inspiring." Jason slotted a screw into the drill. "Where do you want this joist?" Ethan looked at the kid. He felt a lump in his throat. He nodded slowly. 16 inches on centre, Ethan said. "Double up on the perimeter." "On it, boss." Jason started drilling. The sound of the motor cut through the silence of the marsh. It wasn't a lonely sound anymore. It was the sound of a team. The army of the broken. It started with Jason. 2 days later, a beat-up Honda Civic rolled into the lot. It was Maya. Ethan was on the roof, nailing shingles. He froze when he saw her. He hadn't seen her since the night he kicked her out. She got out of the car. She wasn't wearing white silk anymore. She was wearing jeans and a heavy sweater. She looked older, sadder, but grounded. She walked to the base of the ladder. She looked up at him. "I didn't come to fight," she yelled over the wind. Ethan climbed down. He stood before her, hammer in hand. "Why are you here?" "I heard," she said, "about what you're building, a house for donors and recipients." She placed a hand over her heart, the heart Sarah had paid for. "I owe a debt," Maya said softly. "I can't pay it back to her, so I have to pay it forward." "You don't know how to build," Ethan said. "No," Maya admitted, "but I know how to cook, and I know how to organise, and I have a lot of guilt. Guilt is a powerful fuel, Ethan. You of all people should know that." Ethan looked at her. He saw the scars in her eyes, matching the scars in his. "The kitchen is a mess," Ethan said, gesturing to the camping setup. "We need coffee. Real coffee." Maya nodded. She walked toward the tent. She didn't dance. She marched. By the end of the week, there were 5 people on the site. Jason, Maya, Mrs. Gable, who supervised from her porch chair, and 2 local fishermen who had known Sarah when she used to come sit by the ocean to cry. They brought mussel. They brought wood scavenged from old barns. They brought diesel for the generator. The Sarah house began to grow faster. It was shaped like a lantern, just as Sarah had drawn. The main room was a high-ceilinged atrium with walls of glass facing the ocean. But unlike the glass house in Seattle, this glass was warm. It was framed in thick, rough-hewn cedar. It wasn't meant to be invisible. It was meant to hold you. Ethan worked harder than anyone. He was the conductor of this symphony of hammers and saws. But he was changing. He stopped shouting when people made mistakes. When Jason cut a beam too short, Ethan didn't throw a paperweight. He sat down with Jason and showed him how to splice the wood to make a decorative joint. Imperfections are part of the story, Ethan told him. Don't hide the scar. Highlight it. He realised he was talking about himself. One evening, as the sun set, turning the marsh into a field of gold and violet, Ethan sat on the edge of the unfinished deck. Maya sat down next to him. She handed him a mug of soup. "It's good," Ethan said, taking a sip. "It's Sarah's recipe," Maya said. "I found it in one of the old notebooks you left in the boxes. Chicken soup for rainy days." Ethan choked up. He looked at the soup. "I hated this soup," he confessed quietly. "I told her it was bland. I told her I wanted spicy takeout." "It's not bland," Maya said. "It's comforting." "I know," Ethan whispered. "I know that now." "She's here, you know," Maya said, looking out at the water. "In the wood, in the nails, in the soup." "I hope so," Ethan said. "I really hope so." The winter storm. November arrived, bringing with it the true fury of the Pacific coast. The roof wasn't finished. They were racing against the weather. The main skylight, the lens of the lantern, hadn't been installed yet. It was a custom piece of glass, expensive and heavy. Ethan had spent the last of Jason's money on it. The forecast predicted a bomb cyclone, hurricane-force winds and torrential rain. "We have to cover the opening," Ethan shouted, the wind already whipping his hair into his face. "If the rain gets inside now, it will warp the subfloor. We'll lose everything." Jason and the fisherman were struggling with a heavy tarp on the roof. The wind caught it like a sail, nearly throwing Jason off the edge. "It's too strong," Jason yelled. "We can't nail it down." "We have to," Ethan screamed. He climbed up the ladder, adrenaline masking his exhaustion. The rain hit them like bullets. It was freezing cold. Ethan grabbed the edge of the tarp. He pulled with all his strength. His boots slipped on the wet shingles. He slammed his chest against the roof. The pain in his side exploded. It was blinding. He gasped, inhaling water. "Ethan!" Jason crawled toward him. "Nail it!" Ethan roared, holding the tarp down with his own body weight. "Just nail it!" They hammered frantically, the wind trying to rip the canvas from their hands. Thunder shook the very pylons of the house. For an hour they fought the storm. It was a battle of will against nature. Finally, the last nail was driven. The tarp held. Ethan rolled onto his back, staring up at the dark, churning sky. The rain washed the sweat and tears from his face. He was shivering violently. "We did it," Jason panted, lying next to him. Ethan tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough. A deep, wet cough. He sat up and spat. Red. Bright red blood on the black shingles. Jason saw it. His eyes went wide. "Ethan, you're bleeding." "I'm fine," Ethan wheezed, wiping his mouth. "Just bit my tongue." "That's not from your tongue," Jason said. "You need a doctor. Now." "No doctors," Ethan said, echoing Sarah's words. "I have to finish." He tried to stand, but his legs were jelly. He collapsed. Jason caught him. "Help!" Jason yelled down to the others. "Get the truck." The last thing Ethan saw was the unfinished skylight, a dark hole in the roof, waiting for the light. Then the darkness took him. The white room. Reprise. Ethan woke up to the beep of a monitor. For a second, he panicked. He thought he was back in the Sea Mist motel. He thought Sarah was in the chair. He opened his eyes. White walls, sterile smell. He was in a hospital room. Seattle Grace. He tried to sit up. A hand pushed him back gently. It was Dr. Evans. "Easy, Mr. Caldwell. You've been out for 2 days." "The house," Ethan rasped. "The storm." "The house is standing," Dr. Evans said. "Your friend Jason called me. He's been sleeping in the waiting room." Ethan relaxed slightly. "What happened? Is it the kidney?" Dr. Evans looked at the chart. He looked serious. "Your creatinine levels spiked. You were severely dehydrated, malnourished, and you have pneumonia. You pushed your body to the absolute limit, Ethan. The kidney, it took a hit." Ethan closed his eyes. "Is it failing?" "It's stressed," Dr. Evans said. "But it's resilient. Like the donor. It held on. But this was a warning shot. You cannot keep living like this. You cannot build a monument to life by killing yourself." Ethan looked at the IV line in his arm. "She worked herself to death for me," Ethan whispered. "I'm just returning the favour." "That's not how it works," Dr. Evans said sternly. "She didn't die so you could be a martyr. She died so you could live. If you destroy this kidney, you are destroying the last living piece of her. Do you understand that?" Ethan stared at the ceiling. The last living piece of her. He had been treating the build as a punishment, a penance. He was trying to suffer as much as she did. But Sarah hadn't wanted him to suffer. She wanted him to build a lighthouse. Lighthouses don't suffer. They shine. "I understand," Ethan said softly. "Good," Dr. Evans said. "I'm keeping you here for a week. Antibiotics, fluids, and rest. No arguments." "Can I have a sketchbook?" Ethan asked. Dr. Evans smiled. "That I can allow." The final piece Ethan returned to Aberdeen a week later. He looked better. He was still thin, but the colour had returned to his face. He walked with a cane, a temporary measure, Dr. Evans insisted, but he walked upright. When he arrived at the site, he stopped. The house was finished. Well, almost. The siding was up. The roof was sealed. The tarp was gone, replaced by the gleaming custom skylight. Jason, Maya, and the fisherman were standing on the deck, looking guilty and proud. "We didn't want to wait," Jason said, rubbing his neck. "Mrs. Gable sold her jewellery. She bought the last of the materials. We finished the exterior while you were in the hospital." Ethan walked up the ramp. He touched the cedar siding. It was warm from the sun. He walked inside. The atrium was breathtaking. The light poured in from the skylight, hitting the centre of the room with a divine clarity. It smelled of cedar and the sea. It felt safe. It felt holy. But the centre of the room was empty. "It needs one more thing," Ethan said. He walked to the corner where his tool bag was. He pulled out the blue velvet box. He walked to the centre of the room, directly under the shaft of light. "Jason, bring the drill," Ethan said. "And the router." He knelt down on the beautiful pine floor. "What are you doing?" Maya asked. "I'm laying the cornerstone," Ethan said. He used the router to carve a small, rectangular hollow in the floorboards. It was the exact size of the velvet box. He opened the box. He took out the lock of Sarah's hair. He took out the USB drive. He took out the hospital bracelet she had worn 5 years ago. He placed them back in the box. He closed the lid. He placed the box into the hollow in the floor. "This is the heart of the house," Ethan whispered. He took a small piece of clear epoxy resin and poured it over the box, sealing it into the floor forever. It looked like a fossil trapped in amber, a secret beneath the feet of everyone who would ever walk here. He stood up. "Now it's finished," Ethan said. Jason handed him a brass plaque. "We made this. For the door." Ethan looked at the plaque. The Sarah House. A sanctuary for the givers and the keepers. Esther 2025. Ethan ran his thumb over her name. "It's perfect," he said. The opening. Christmas Eve, 2025. The Sarah House was glowing. Inside the lantern-like structure, warm lights beamed out across the dark marsh, visible for miles. It truly looked like a lighthouse on the edge of the world. It wasn't a gala. There were no press, no champagne, no investors in suits. The guests were different. There was a young mother whose son had donated his heart. There was an old man who was seeing the world through transplanted corneas. There was a teenager on the waiting list for a lung, breathing with an oxygen tank. They sat on the comfortable chairs Maya had sourced. They drank hot cocoa. They looked at the ocean through the glass walls. They told their stories. Ethan stood in the corner, watching them. He was wearing a simple sweater. He held a mug of tea. He watched a woman run her hand over the cedar wall, closing her eyes as if feeling the pulse of the tree. He realised that he had finally built something that worked. It didn't just stand up against gravity. It stood up against loneliness. Mrs. Gable walked up to him. She was wearing a dress for the first time in 20 years. "You did good, kid," she grunted. "Not bad for a city boy." "Couldn't have done it without the land," Ethan said. The land was useless anyway," she waved him off. "By the way, that Porsche. The transmission is shot. You owe me." Ethan laughed. It was a real laugh, deep and resonant. "I'll fix it," he promised. "I'm good with my hands." Jason came over, holding a glass of cider. "Ethan, there's someone outside asking for you. Says he knows you." Ethan frowned. "Who?" "Didn't give a name. Just standing by the pier." Ethan put down his mug. He walked out onto the deck. The cold air was bracing. He walked down the ramp to the pier. A man was standing there, looking out at the dark water. He wore a long trench coat. Ethan approached slowly. The man turned. It was Michael Vance, the private investigator. "Vance," Ethan said. "I didn't think you were the sentimental type." "I'm not," Vance said. He looked at the glowing house. "But I like to see a job finished. You actually built it." "I did." "You know," Vance said, reaching into his pocket, "I never finished my report on your wife. I found something else. After she died. I didn't give it to you because, well, you were a mess." "What is it?" Ethan asked. Vance handed him a small, sealed envelope. "It's a letter," Vance said. She mailed it to herself the day she left Seattle, postmarked from the Greyhound station. It was in her personal effects that the cops held. Ethan took the envelope. His hands shook slightly. Why give it to me now? Because now you look like a man who can read it without jumping off a bridge, Vance said. He tipped his invisible hat. Merry Christmas, Caldwell. Vance walked away into the darkness. Ethan stood alone on the pier. The light from the Sarah house cast a long, golden path across the water. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. Sarah's handwriting. Shaky, hurried, but determined. Ethan, if you are reading this, it means you went looking for me. It means you didn't just let me go. That makes me happy. I'm leaving because I love you enough to set you free from the burden of my death. But I'm also leaving because I want to give you a chance to find yourself again. You were never the glass house, Ethan. You were the boy who sketched tree houses on napkins. You were the boy who wanted to build shelter, not statues. Don't mourn me for too long. The kidney I gave you. It loves chocolate, and it hates gin. It likes to dance even if you don't. Listen to it. Build something real. And when you're done, look for me in the light. I'm always with you. Your invisible foundation. Sarah. Ethan lowered the letter. Tears ran down his face, hot and fast, but they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of gratitude. He looked up at the house. Through the glass, he saw Maya laughing with Jason. He saw the patients resting. He saw the light. He put a hand on his side. He felt the steady, rhythmic pulse of life. I hear you, Ethan whispered. I'm listening. He turned and walked back up the ramp, out of the dark and into the warmth of the house he had built on the bones of his grief. The heron in the marsh took flight, its great wings beating against the air, rising up, until it disappeared into the stars.